Hey everyone, the day is finally here. We are officially now starting 3 hours of React. So if you're just tuning in, so 3 hours of React. For the next 3 hours, we're going to bring on 5 React experts to talk about a wide range of different topics about React.js. And I'm excited to say that, for this event, we've had hundreds of different signups for people from all over the world who are going to be tuning in. And, in this presentation, I invite you to, ask questions during the talks. I'll be sure to collect your questions and have the speakers answer them after their 30-minute sessions. So as I stated before, yes, we have had hundreds of different signups from all over the world. And a big part of that is actually because of our community partners. So before we go ahead and start with 3 hours of React, I wanted to go ahead and give a quick shout out to all of our community partners who've helped us, share the name, share the event itself, and kind of get the word out there. So the first community partner we got is React Vancouver Meetup. React Vancouver Meetup has almost 3,000 members. They're one of the largest tech communities in the Vancouver area. They are very active and host a lot of different events. So if you're looking for a React event, definitely worth checking out, especially if you live within the Vancouver area. Another community partner we have is from Facebook Developer Circle, which is the Delhi chapter. Developer circles are communities that provide free tools, and the Delhi chapter has been very helpful for us, not only for this event, but also past events. They've been great to work with, and they're definitely worth checking out, not just for React, but also for other types of software development stuff that you would like to learn. Next community partner, this.labs. They provide, let's say your company needs some sort of help with technical aspects. They provide architectural guidance, staff augmentation, subject matter experts, temporary CTOs, one-on-one help, and mentorship. So if you need that, definitely hit them up. We also have Modern Web podcasts. So Modern Web, they not only provide podcasts for different aspects of React, Vue, and tons of other type of front-end languages, but they also provide events mostly within the Bay Area and North Carolina area. Of course, we're now mostly doing that stuff online at this point, but that is something that they also provide. Another thing, one of the last two partners that we have React Native Now, a bi-weekly newsletter dedicated to providing news on React Native. So if you want sort of tips and tricks and all sorts of updates that are happening with React Native, definitely subscribe to this bi-weekly newsletter. And lastly, LearnCode.js, a Twitter account dedicated to providing free resources for learning JavaScript. So if you're on Twitter, definitely worth giving them a subscription. All right, so now that we got the introductions out of the way, I will be bringing on Manjula Dubey. And so Manjula, you actually have quite a bit of experience talking about this. You have about a year of experience talking about accessibility, which I am excited to hear about. I think this is actually a really great starting point for this presentation, because what better way to start this presentation than talking about, hey, how to build React apps for everybody. Yeah. All right. So if you'll do me a favor. So Manjula, you are a web engineer at N26, which is a banking system based in Berlin, Germany. And also you're the founder of Gigabyte, which provides tech workshops on web development and organizes internal conferences. Yeah. Nice. So other than that, yeah, if you'll do me a favor, if you'll go ahead and share your screen.
Yes, and things should be visible. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. So hi, everyone. Today I'll be talking about building a web app for everyone and how we are going to take care of that while we are using the React JS sort of library. We'll see that. We'll also see some tips and tricks that you can use in general. Doesn't matter what framework you're using. So a bit introduction about myself. As you know, as Jemmy already introduced me, that I work as a web engineer at N26. I'm also an organizer at React India, and that's my Twitter account. So if you would like to follow me, I tweet stuff about React accessibility, and that's it. So if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle. So today we'll be covering about types of disabilities, what are assistive technologies that we can use. So mostly the talk would be covering how we would create React components in order to have an accessible web app. And also we would cover mostly for users who are non-sighted, for example, who would use voiceovers, for example. So we would also see how keyboard navigation is important and how it can screw stuff if you don't really, take care of that stuff. We would also see how you can write better semantic HTML code, which will help you make more accessible web apps. So first of all, I would like to say that accessibility is not a barrier to innovation. In fact, it brings another level of innovation because you care and you're trying to build for everyone and you're also including everyone. So doesn't matter if it's React, Vue, or Angular, you can build an accessible web apps with all of the frameworks. So a bit about WCAG, they sort of set standard guidelines that helps you makes your web app more accessible. So if you don't follow them, your web app is not accessible. So you can just go to the wcag.org and sort of see what are the guidelines that can help you make accessible web apps. And these are different compliance level, so-called compliance level, where you say, okay, if your website follows AA, that means you're, so-called in a better position. But if it's a single A, you still need to work on your website to make it more accessible. And definitely if you're AAA, which not all the companies can do it, because, there are sort of feature development, product development going on here and there. So the AAA is sort of a highest level of compliance level, according to WCAG. So why does accessibility matters for us in general and for everyone and for all the web devs hearing this talk? So in this world, there is a lot of people. There are devs working on, different stuff, shipping different products each day. There are your grandparents using your products. There also might be some legal people monitoring your websites. And, if they're not accessible enough, for example, in Europe, you need to follow certain compliance. In US, you need to follow certain compliance. And if you don't follow it, they might just sue you. So that is why we should be building accessible web apps. And now, when I started off with accessibility in general, I really had a very wrong view. For example, I just thought that it's about blind users, and each one of us can have different perceptions. You might have a different perception, I might have a different perception, but we should understand that it's far beyond that, blind users and non-sighted users. There are different kind of disability, and 1 in every 10 users can have some kind of disability. For example, they can be visual, cognitive, auditory, motor, and I don't want to go in depth. You can read about it, but we'll see more of practical examples. And it can also be on situation. For example, you might just break your arm while you're playing. So you should be responsible as a developer to build for everyone. And this is sort of a theory which, accessibility follows. For example, whatever you're building should be perceivable. It should be operable no matter what. It should be operable by a keyboard, mouse. There are other ways to also interact with your UI, for example, mouth sticks. So all of these standards and things should be taken care while you're building. So build for everyone. That's my talk. And it should be keyboard accessible, as I said before, making sure that you have enough color contrast. Doesn't matter what framework you use, Angular, React, Vue. So nothing can prevent us basically from building accessible web apps. So we'll see some examples how we will be writing some semantic way of writing your HTML, which we all write HTML in our daily life as a front-end devs, but maybe you're not writing in a better way, and that is why your web app is not accessible. So to say, I always start with accessibility is already in browsers. It's just our website might not be. And so I always say this quote that web is already accessible, but maybe your website isn't. So there are many ways to browse the web. We'll see keyboard users, we'll see headband, mouse stick, for example, and single switch there. So today we'll see most of the examples that we'll see today are screen readers. The blind users rely on assistive technologies called VoiceOver in Mac to navigate through your website. We'll see most of the examples through that. I really like Twitter. They have this keyboard shortcuts, which is also one of the things that adds to being accessible, because you're providing a user sort of a shortcut to do anything. If the user is keyboard user only, so this might be one of the thing that you should do. Definitely some general tips before we move on to React side. So there's always whenever you're working with sort of color contrast, you collaborate with your designer. Make sure that you as a developer are also responsible enough to see you're maintaining sort of the AA compliance. So the Google Chrome DevTools already, when you hover over any color, you see it gives you a contrast ratio. So if it is more than 3, you are already passing the contrast ratio. That means everything is fine. Here you see on the left hand side, and here you see it's 1.87, which is really less. So it compares your contrast ratio against the background color. So a text on a background color. So definitely make use of such tools. There's also something called as contrast ratio, where you can check your background color against your text color. So your foreground color, make use of that as well. So it gives you a contrast ratio, whether it is good or bad. Definitely make use of it. Make sure you always have something battle tested already. I mean, just don't go for reinventing the wheel. If somebody is already built that is accessible enough, why not use it? Make sure you have light mode and dark mode. All of us have a different, and this is not to do something with blind users or users with cognitive impairments. It's it can be a user and who might have some strain seeing the dark light or the seeing the light shade screen. So make sure that you manage both the modes. This is one of the things really important, and I don't see a lot of website making it, but there's something called as skip to main content, and these are mainly useful for users who are using a voiceover, for example, assistive technology. And so when they navigate through your website, they want to see some button. So once you start tabbing through your keyboard, you'll see the first tab, it will see skip to main content, and then it shows you the main content. So make sure you sort of have these kind of features. And because as a non-sighted user, I want to definitely go directly to my main content rather than seeing all the variety of stuff which is useless for me. Okay, let's go. So always have a descriptive name for your alt tag text, which means let's say you have this picture where the two mans are standing with a flag, but here you say, okay, 2 men holding a flag, which is okay, but to make it more descriptive, because alt tag is just not an attribute just to put in. there is a reason why you put an alt text, because when the screen readers are using it, it gives you a description about the image. And when the non-sighted user is navigating through your website, he or she knows about this image and what exactly this image is all about. So you see, in the first image, I have the alt tags which says two man holding flag, and in the second one it specifies more. There's a more description to that, and it says two man holding a US flag. So this is just a normal example, but very very niche thing to know. Unique titles, definitely having the page titles which are unique. So if you're using React, use helmet and have a unique titles for each of the pages. And now we'll see how we can do sort of magic and accessibility thing in React. So nothing changes because you're writing JSX, but you're still writing HTML, and it's just writing more semantically rather than just fiddling around with how to deal with accessibility in general. So here we see a very cool example. Let's say this is a text area. Nothing changes. If you see a lot of things except your area attributes become, have the camel case thing. So make sure, for example, the tab index here becomes tab, instead of tab hyphen index, it becomes tab index here. So make sure, things changes to camel case. Make sure you know about that. Start using fragments instead of div. I remember when I started with React, since you cannot return two adjacent elements from your render method, we always used to wrap it with div. But trust me, when you sort of add an extra div in your DOM, it changes the entire structure of your page, and this could be a little bit weird for the person who's non-sighted and who's relying on the voiceover. For example, there could be a lot of extra divs which would be there in your DOM, and using fragments does not add an extra DOM. It does not add an extra element to your DOM, so use fragments. So how would we handle forms here? So basically, we'll see the three things here, which is required fields, errors, and disabled buttons in this example. So let's say we have an input component, and we have an input component, but before we are trying to submit, it pops up an error saying the field is required field. So if you see, your input component has a required attribute which I have passed, and this sort of in the entire input component looks something like this, because always an input should be associated with the label, no matter what, because that gives you an association of what the label is and what the input is. So the way I have built my the way I have built my input component is, as soon as I pass a required attribute to it, I make sure that in my render method where I have a label and the input, I make sure I also pass area required true. In this way, the person who's non-sighted and who's using the assistive technology will know that, okay, this field is a required one. So don't just write required. You should also make sure that you are writing the area attributes. So let's say now we have an example where we have multiple fields. You already saw how the input component looks like. But here what happens is, we have all the fields with asterisk, which is required. So why not give something at the top wherein the user gets the information much earlier? Like, instead of doing the stuff right here, yes, you're doing that, but making sure that the user knows prior enough that, all the fields marked with asterisk are required. So in this case, user who's non-sighted, he already has the hint in his brain that, all of the fields with asterisk are required. So, always give more information to the users. A non-sighted user will always rely on lot of text, not lot of, but, descriptive text, which gives him context of what is happening on the screen. So here is the same example we saw. We are trying to give prior information here saying that all the fields are required, which are marked with asterisk. So something like that should always be there. If you know already, you can give more information to the user, give it. Now, let's say you have a field with a specific format. As a non-sighted user, I would not even know that, okay, this format should be entered. So how would you do that? So the way you would do that is you have a label, you have an input, well and good, because you should have a label and an input associated to each other. But here, when I say, okay, date, I need to give some specific information to the user for the label, so that when the non-sighted user is trying to enter something, he knows that what date format he has to add. So here I've used area labeled by to the input element, and I say, okay, instruct is the name which I'm giving. And now this instruct is nothing but an ID with this, which has a span, which gives them more information about this input, which is a label. So, always make sure giving more information. So here I have used area labeled by. Now let's see, can we have more description being given to the same input? Yes, definitely. You can pass multiple text to the area labeled by. And the way the screen readers will read it is they'll read date, because this is something delabeled. So first they'll say, okay, date. And then they'll say date must be MMDDYY format. So because I have an input, but because it is a non-sighted user who is navigating through your web app, make sure that you give that information. And if you see, I've used area labeled by, and area labeled by can have multiple text to it. And one more thing I want to make clear is area labeled by is intended to identify the element that labels the current element. So in this case, I am not basically overriding the label, but giving more information about the label, right? So definitely there are some people who make use of this technique, but I would say that this is not the right way. Instead, use area described by. And that's the major difference, because when you are overriding your label, definitely go ahead and use area labeled by. But when you're giving more description about your label, use area described by. So it's the same example, but we just replaced it with area described by. Cool. So handling errors. Errors are also an important part, because, you have several fields in your forms and there are some errors, and this should be alerted well to the users who are using assistive technology, for example. So turns out that area described by is a perfect thing that you should definitely use, because it is again giving some more description about the errors that it will generate. So for example, you add something like this and it says, okay, invalid email address, right? Now what happens? Now what I have done here is I have my input component that you saw before, which is associated sort of with label and input. And I give my area described by a value which says email errors. And now this email errors is nothing, but whenever there will be an error, this will pop up. So again, since there is a lot of information about my input given by the errors, whenever there will be an error, so use area described by. And this error component is nothing but, you sort of map all the errors and show it to. So the important thing is to, understand how and why we are using the area attributes here. Handling disabled button. This is most important thing every developer should know. So stop using disabled attribute at all. Don't use it, because once you start using disabled attribute, so let's say I have then action component with me wherein I pass disabled as a attribute. As soon as I pass disabled as an attribute, what I want is, okay, my button should get disabled. Now what happens when you do something like this? So whenever you do something like this, it gets removed from your accessibility tree. That means the user who's non-sighted and who's trying to use a voiceover to know what's happening with the form would not even know that this button exists, because this button gets removed from the accessibility tree, so that user will not even know. So in order to not do that, and this is not a good way to do it, don't disable a button ever. In fact, make the button look disabled. So you should apply some CSS to your button. For example, add pointer events none, you can say cursor none, and you can also so now all of these CSS you would apply to make it look disabled and to also prevent the touch and the click. So make it look disabled and pass the area disabled, so that the non-sighted user knows that, okay, this button is disabled. So never ever add a disabled attribute to a button. And suppose there is a requirement that you have to do it, you can definitely have a prop allowed disabled, and add a disabled attribute to a button. But trust me, this will never be a case, and don't do it ever. Have a self-explanatory CTAs, that we should have it, definitely. I mean, click here, go here. No. I mean, as a sighted user, I know because I have the context of the page, but when the user is non-sighted, always make sure you have big information, descriptive enough. Even if it is not visible to the sighted user, that's fine. So there can be a scenario where the visual layer does not need to be explanatory. You can always make sure that that is hidden by the user who's sighted, and give more information. So for example, you see here the text the sighted user will see is continue, but for the user who is non-sighted and would use VoiceOver to navigate through your page, would see a descriptive and more content, because he needs more descriptive contents to know what is going to happen next. Decorative buttons, for example, here you see, as a user, I'm clicking and I can see, okay, something is happening. But what about the non-sighted users who are coming to your website? So make sure there is always an area label that you provide. Whenever there is decorative icons, for example, decorative buttons, make sure there is area label that you provide to the user, so that he knows what's happening. So when, once the user will focus on this and he'll try to press enter through the keyboard, he will already know, okay, someone has clicked area labeled. So the VoiceOver will read it like that. So make sure you have enough label. DOM and visual order, this is one of the things that we should know, that we use Flexbox because yes, it is good. You can do flex direction and you can change stuff from row to column and things are good. But when you are doing such a thing, always make sure that your tabbing of the website is not skewed, because it should be tabbed in a way it is there in the visual order in the DOM. So make sure that is correct. Hiding the content, again, don't ever use display none, or the content will be also visible for the screen reader. So when you say display none or visibility hidden, these contents actually get removed from the accessibility tree as well. So instead of doing something like this, make sure that it is accessible to the screen reader. So how you would do it is, this will be visually hidden, but still accessible. So there are some sort of CSS which you can definitely find, which will make sure that whatever is there on your screen is like off screen, but still there in your DOM and is read by your screen readers. So make sure none display, don't ever use it. You can also definitely have a helper. So for example, if you're using styled components, you can sort of have a helper, and whenever you need to apply it, you can apply to that particular element. You can also have a component, for example, whatever you want to visually hide, just sort of have a component for it and put the text or put the component in it, and it will be visually hidden. Icons, as said before, more information, always provide more information. Take charge of your focus, make sure that the focus whenever you're sort of dealing with modals or your forms, make sure that they are focused. For example, when you load a page, make sure where the focus should be, what is your main content. So let's say you were very new to your or you're very new to accessibility. How would you start? So open your favorite websites, start pressing tab key to move forward through your page, and if it is moving and if it is accessible enough, it will be moved through different controls, for example buttons, links, and press shift plus tab to move backwards. That means you can navigate through your website through your keyboard, and that's the best test you should start with. Handling dialogues, I would say there are two different models already that are accessible. For example, React area model, and there's something called as React LI dialog. So both of these are accessible. You can definitely go through it and check out how they've done things. There are some development and tools, testing tools that I would like to share, and also some linting stuff that is good enough. So there's something called as JSX LI, which statically checks for accessibility mistakes. So already if you're typing something and let's say you forget something, you forget to add an alt text, so it will basically give you an error. So make use of this. This is called JSX LI, and definitely it's one of the good tools when you start with React. There's something called as React X as well. It basically consoles down the serious issues and moderate issues if you have any in your web app. Make sure, yes, you use it in your development mode. Make sure you do not use it in your production mode, otherwise it will be listed with a lot of issues in your console and production. So React Axe is one of them. Agnostic Axe is also very similar to it. Go and have a check out. There are certain advantages of Agnostic X when you compare it with React X. So I would say it runs the audits only when the DOM changes, but this doesn't happen with React X. It also changes with every DOM. So I mean, even if there is no DOM changes, it still changes. So you can check out. I'm just giving up the link so that you have a better idea of it. Sorry. So there's something called as PELI, and it's called as PA11Y. And this is something called as Automated Accessibility Testing PAL, which you can also include it in your build to have an internal audit. And the way it runs is you can globally install it and say, okay, PA11Y and the website that you want to mention, and it'll start giving you the serious errors on the terminal. So you can also test it with it. There is also color contrast checker, which I already spoke about. There are a lot of browser extensions, but I really like WAVE because it helps you build stuff much cleaner way. Also, there's something called a Storybook Add-ons LI. So while you're building your design components in your Storybook, you can check whether whatever you're building is accessible or not right there. It's like an add-on that will be sitting just beside your knobs. So definitely worth checking out. There are some sanity checklists that you should be doing. For example, having dark and light mode. Make sure that everything is descriptive. That means you have an alt text which is descriptive. You have a label which is descriptive. Decorative icons have a descriptive name. Make sure that you have a mechanism to pause the background video if you have it on your website. Have a color contrast which is sufficient. Make sure that the animations are subtle and are not much flashy. Sometimes it might cause some issues like migraines or dizziness. Make sure you do that. Have live captioning and transcript, and always have a way that you can pause the animation or have the animation deactivated if it is there on your website, because some users might have some problems with it. Next is there is a lot of compliance compliant WCAG if you want to read about it. What are the things that you should follow when you're dealing with conformance AA? You can go and check it out. Here's the link. A lot of desktop screen readers. I mean, so far I've only worked with VoiceOver because I'm a Mac user, but depending on the OS you have, there are different screen readers that non-sighted user can use. There's something called as Simulate Vision in Chrome Tools, which was, I think, already 7-8 months ago, where you can actually simulate your vision. So if you go to more tools, rendering, and you see simulate vision, here you actually can simulate your vision based on blurred vision, pronotopia, and there are a lot of different vision here. For example, not good to red light, not good to yellow light, yellow color. So this is how it works. Yes, so this is where you basically select the vision, and you see your content accordingly. So we move on, and yeah, so lastly I would like to end with saying, get skilled at building accessible web apps. It's not difficult, it's not rocket science, it's just the way we write our HTML. And one last thing, I'm also writing a book, so that's called Building Accessible Websites 101, which would cover a lot of things that I've learned in past 2 years. And already I'm launching it today. I mean, right here. So definitely it will be up. I'll be launching it on 16th November. And you can start pre-ordering as well, next week but surely if you're interested, make a sign up so that I know you're really interested. And this book will not only cover, for example, examples, but also have some case studies, with that lot of companies are building, how they are using and how they're doing it. So yes, and sign up, and that's my newsletter if you're interested more about accessibility or React or GraphQL in general. Sign up, and that's my Twitter handle too. Thank you so much, and thank you, NIMBELLA, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
All right. So you actually got quite a few questions, and we have enough time for like a nice little Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
So question number one, for starting off with accessibility, what are the 3 things you could do at the very beginning to make your React app more accessible? Like, what, in your opinion, would be the 3 top things you should start off with?
Yeah. So I think when you start off and you already have a product which is already built, I think the first thing would be to test if it's accessible or not. And if it is not, it's the way you write your HTML. So, I mean, I didn't do any rocket science, but, it's more of writing the semantic way of HTML. That means, whenever there is some structure given to you, instead of just putting a div, start looking it as a structure. For example, what is your main content? Where can you apply a nav bar? For example, stop using div in React and use fragments wherever necessary. So it's just a semantic way of writing your HTML, not a rocket science.
Makes sense. All right. So the next question you've got, I am interested in talking with other communities who build accessible apps. Do you have any communities that you would recommend that I join so I can start learning how to build my own accessible apps?
Yeah, sure. So there's this LI project, which is a newsletter. Anybody who's definitely interested, please join. Like, this is one of the coolest thing. Also, there's LI Berlin, because I live in Berlin. I definitely follow them. So there's LI Berlin meetup, which happens every month. I mean, not that I know of something very, very much globally, but definitely there's something called as DQ Systems. If you're interested to read a lot of articles, so they generate a lot. I mean, they write a lot of articles as well. And there's also LI Club. So you can definitely join that as well. It's a meetup group.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, with COVID going on right now, I could use like all the meetup groups I can find to, keep myself busy.
Yeah. I mean, I can post all of the links later if somebody wants. You can share it.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, definitely post them in the private chat or the
Yeah.
comment section, and I'll be happy to share them.
Yeah.
All right. So, um, you kind of went over this a little bit about like the tools you use to make your apps more accessible.
Mhm.
Do you have any other kind of tools you would recommend that like, maybe you didn't cover, like maybe some more like higher level ones?
Mm-hmm. I think I didn't cover Lighthouse. For example, when you use sort of Lighthouse, most of the developers use for performance and stuff. And now they have this tab for accessibility as well, wherein they also show whether how much percentage your website is accessible. So I did not mention about Lighthouse, but other than that, I think I covered most of the parts. I mean, React Axe is one of the things that people should start with, and JSXLI if you're not using it. That is like a starting point if you're new to accessibility, because it starts giving you all the errors in the console, and then you got to go and fix it. Or definitely, I would also say you can also get touch in with some auditing third-party tools. They come in and they basically audit your tools, and they say, okay, this is sort of a report that you should work on, and then you got to fix it.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. All right, so you got two other questions in the chat. I think we have enough for like two more. So one of the questions, I built a project with React.js and the same project in Next.js.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Lighthouse, both apps are still green in terms of SEO. Does the SEO part have really a significant difference in Next.js?
I mean, this is not an accessibility question, but yes, I would love to take it up. So in React, when you are sort of doing the client side only, that means CSSR, you sort of lose the SEO part, because the Google crawler might not crawl properly, and that's where you start losing all the SEO stuff. But when I think Next.js already has this thing called SSR, which means server-side rendering. And when you already have your website built using SSR, you already have the SEO part covered. So, and that's like the major difference.
Makes sense. All right, and we got one last question. So the last question, this is more of like a technical one. So it's more, do you need to use a Create React app any more after we have Next.js or Gatsby.js?
I think it totally depends on you. Gatsby is all about building static websites. I mean, if you want to start with Gatsby, yes, but there is also a con that then you have to rely on all the plugins. Like you have all the Gatsby plugins, and then you got to put in that. I mean, it totally depends on you as a developer. I still write my code and my side projects starting with Create React App. So I don't think there's a major difference. It's all about your choice. Gatsby is used only for, building static websites. And when you sort of use Gatsby, you also got to be more focused what plugins they have and do they support or not. So there's also one level sort of dependency to it, but it's totally your choice. I mean, I don't have a stricter opinion.
Okay. All right. So yeah, thank you for answering all of those questions. Do you have any like last things you want to say before we go ahead and wrap up?
Thank you so much, Jemmy, and thank you, NIMBELLA, for giving me this opportunity. I really loved it. And yeah, I mean, hope to do more. That's it. Thank you so much.
Hey, well, thank you so much for coming on board. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So we're going to be bringing in our next speaker soon. So someone asked a question, will this be uploaded later? Yes, once the stream is done, the video will be provided and be able to be rewatched later. So right now, we're going to take a quick break because currently we are having a few technical issues with one of our speakers who's trying to get on board. I'm going to go ahead and help him get everything set up. So if you'll just give me 5 minutes, we will be back on the air itself. All right. Oh, okay. Perfect timing. Hey, how you doing?
Good, good. Hi, Jamie. Nice to finally see you.
Nice
Glad
to
to
see
be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you back here as well. Sorry about all of that. Gonna go ahead and get that taken care of. Okay, let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. So, gonna go ahead and give you a quick introduction. So,
Yeah.
Shodipo Ayomide. So you have been a developer advocate for a couple of years now. Like, you're now a senior dev advocate.
Yeah.
You've also
Years.
you've also worked for as a media developer expert for a
Cloudinary.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Cloudinary is a media delivery company that basically helps you manage media assets like videos, basically everything media, videos, images, and GIFs. Like they basically just help you hand over these things progressively and like in a smart way, so you don't have to like have things like assets and just like dump a whole bunch of images there and like just fetch them to like regular way we do it. And with Cloudinary, like everything's basically progressive. Even in what we're going to talk about today, there is a way Cloudinary can be brought into it, but I wouldn't be bringing Cloudinary into it, but there is a way I'm going to talk about it. But I wouldn't be doing a workshop on it. But I think I'm just going to put it sick and just basically see how Cloudinary basically will help you when building progressive like web apps for thinking about the web and the web and the mobile version at the same time. So yeah, Cloudinary is really a great company. You can just go over to cloudinary.com and you can take a look about what they do. They have a documentation open there. Yeah, pretty much.
Nice. Yeah, well, hey, you know what? I'm very excited to go over your presentation. So in your presentation, you're going to be discussing like building applications with web and mobile in mind. So that is something I'm really interested in like hearing about.
Yeah, I'm excited to give this.
Nice. So if you do me a favor, go ahead and share your screen and we'll go ahead and get you started.
Okay, let's do this. Okay, present. Okay, I think I got it wrong. Application window, Chrome tab.
All right, I see something pop up.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, I can see your screen and awesome. The slides are already looking good. So, all right, I'll let you go ahead and take it from here.
Exciting. So yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, NIMBELLA, for having me on board. This is an opportunity to really talk about something that I love, which is really making things performant and progressive. And this is something I really advocate for. I advocate for super performance, making things as fast as possible, as fast as it possibly can go. Really, like we can start building applications, and as we click one thing, if we could remember, like really those days where WordPress was still like really super slow. Where when you click something, you have to really like relax, probably get a cup of coffee before it loads up. That was like then, but right now WordPress is fast, thanks to adopting technologies like React, GraphQL, and other things that could help the system go faster. And so speed is something that should really be treated as a feature and shouldn't be something. For example, you can't optimize for speed when you're done building your applications. That cannot happen. You optimize for speed while building your applications because there are certain prerequisites you have to follow. There are certain principles you have to follow while building apps, and you want to optimize at the same time. There are certain principles you have to follow, and you can't say I've built out all my structure, built out all the application, and now I want to like really build for progressive web apps or something. It doesn't really work that way, and I think this is something that we have to put in mind. So in this talk, I'm going to be talking about building React apps and having web and mobile in mind while building your React apps. I'm going to be talking around the box of progressive web apps and a lot about performance too. So yeah, I can't wait to get started. So yeah, let's move forward a bit. My name is Shodipo Ayomide. I am a senior developer advocate and developer programs manager. Also, there's this program GitHub is running called the STARS program, of which I was one of the second Nigerians to join this program. And yeah, I think I forgot to mention I'm from Nigeria, and yeah, you should visit Nigeria sometimes, an awesome country. So I'm a GitHub star, also a Cloud9 media developer expert, and I love to consider myself a community evangelist. I do a lot of work with the community. I'm excited to really work with the community, and yeah, you can also catch me on Twitter and GitHub at developer.io. You can see most of my projects on GitHub and follow me on Twitter. I kind of tweet a lot. As of right now, there are a lot of issues happening in Nigeria, I'm tweeting about, which is about the NSAS movement and the police brutality. So I think that you won't be seeing me tweeting anything tech right now. We're kind of really trying to manage the country here and make things better. So yeah, moving forward, let's get into the good stuff. So we're going to first start with progressive web app. Basically, what are progressive web apps? So progressive web applications, a mobile web page that basically acts like a native application. It's kind of that straightforward. So I have like a regular website, like even StreamYard is a regular website. Like every application we see, Twitter.com is a regular website, but then making that regular website acts like a mobile application, like a native application built with language like Java, Kotlin, React Native, or Flutter. That's basically what progressive web app is, where like, okay, hey, how was this built? Was it and it's super lightweight? This is the beauty of progressive web apps. So let's move forward. So 5 billion devices connected the web, like globally, like we have about 5 billion, rather not 5,000, but 5 billion devices connected to the internet globally. And like every one of them is running applications seamlessly and internets and doing a whole bunch of things. We have the phones, we have the iPad, we have the laptops, we have the smartwatches, we have IoT devices, we have a whole bunch of devices, and they are all running internet. So yeah, let's move forward. So the next is one major thing about progressive web apps is we need to have this kind of smooth experience, because you will not have your clients staying with your applications and then returning if they don't have that smooth experience. With progressive web apps, it gives you that smooth experience in both the web and the mobile version. So when your app is really, with that word progressive, it's not just you making it a native application, but giving it that progressive feeling where it's moving, it's not static, it's not something that's super slow, it's something that keeps moving, it's not something that's just stable, or that just like really just super slow, but it's really just, it has a smooth experience. Like when you click something, it just flows out, click another thing, flows in, click another, it just moves. This is how it works, and progressive web app basically gives you also that smooth experience for both the web version and the mobile version. And for progressive web apps, the mobile version is a replica of what we have on the web. That's really what it is. So progressive web app is super reliable. It gives us that smooth feeling when we are using the application on our mobile phone, and also super fast. This one thing that is really important. Progressive web apps are super fast thanks to features like the offline support and many others that we'll talk about as we move forward. Yeah, it's also easy to access from our phone, just like add to screen and just click the application like a regular application downloaded from your Apple Store or your Play Store. And yeah, I'm going to talk about that more as we move forward. So yeah.
Oh, hey, quick thing before we go ahead. We had a few people in the chat. You're doing your presentation's great. If you'll just speak like a little bit slower, some people are having trouble like kind of keeping up with like the information being provided.
Okay, I get that.
That's all I suggest. Oh, appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of speak fast a lot sometimes, and I think before I usually say, hey, am I speaking too fast, or like I should slow down? So yeah, thanks Jamie for that. I'm gonna try to slow down a bit as we move forward. So thanks, Jamie.
Appreciate it.
So the next thing is using progressive web app is super simple. It's really as just basically you just adding this web app to your device by just okay, there's this button right here we have on our iPhones. So once you click on this, it gives you this option. Then you find all of this as one that says add to home screen. So clicking the add to home screen option here automatically adds the progressive web app to your device. That's basically how it works. So, but then you have to do this on your phone. So click this button, add to home screen, wait a couple of seconds, and this pop up. As you can see, this icon here, this image is exactly the same as others, but the others are original applications built by different languages, probably Swift or other like mobile programming languages. But as for this one here, this is a web app. This is a web app, but it looks exactly the same. So when you click this also, it acts the exact same way every other application here acts, and it's super lightweight. So you add to home screen first, then, so yeah, it's as simple as that. Just add to home screen. That's how you get started with like progressive web apps after building out the progressive web app, of which I'm going to show you how to do that in React later in this talk. But for now, we have a progressive web app running. Add it to home screen, appears in the home screen, and we're done. And basically, you can use this app anywhere you go. Let's move forward. So basically, progressive web apps acts like just your regular app on your phone, and it's super lightweight. As I said before, it is super lightweight. It acts like your regular application on your phone. As we all have, you can build a progressive web app music player that is super lightweight. It wasn't built with Swift, it wasn't built with Java, it wasn't built with Kotlin, it wasn't built with Flutter or React Native. It was built with pure JavaScript, but acts like a mobile app on your phone. This is the beauty of progressive web apps. And trust me, when users are trying to use your product, and one key thing they all look for is, when I click this, how soon does it give me what I want? Because many people are not patient. Many people who are working with your product are not patient. You have to optimize for diverse audience. People who are patient enough can also want to move fast. People who are like, they're not patient, they also want to move fast. So basically, if you're optimizing for people who are not patient, you're also optimizing for people who are patient also. So people that can, but then they don't have to wait. But since they're patient, like all good, the better. So optimize your applications for everyone, not just one person, but just really for everyone. Performance is one thing that should always be considered when building any kinds of apps, and progressive web app is something that is super lightweight, and we should always take into account. So this is an example of which I'm going to talk about, starting from the Lyft app. So this is an app like one we have Uber or Bolt or likewise. So the Lyft app this is an Android app on the Play Store. Right now on the Play Store, this app is worth 70 megabytes. That's this one. And on the iOS store, that's the App Store, is 75 megabytes. But when we talk about progressive web app, it's less than 1 MB. So think about the amount of space, the amount of storage space, the amount of data you are saving, the amount of space you are saving on your mobile device when using a progressive web app, rather than you using the original app itself. You are saving so much space, especially for the Android users who have less space. Most times, iOS users always buy phones worth of 256 gigabyte, 512 gigabyte. There's a whole lot of space to use there. But then there are Android phones that goes with 64 gig, 128. But in that case, you need to like save a lot of space for other things to like really stay in. And as you're saving space, also remember, as you use the device, data are being cached. And remember, it's a progressive web app. So in as much as you have data catching on your local device, because it's a progressive web app, you also have data catching also on the website. So it's everything, all the load for this progressive web app is not just on your phone, it's also on the server at their end also. So it's not just on your phone. So this is basically helping a lot of things. We're making your app super lightweight and super fast. So progressive web app is faster than most Android apps and most iOS native apps. Because why? It catches a lot, and that's basically if you enable it, though. That's one important thing. So if you want to enable offline support, you can enable that in your service worker. If you do not, you can cancel that if you don't have to, since if it's something that changes, that basically just changes rapidly, you don't have to enable the offline support in your service worker. So super fast loading on slow networks, very important. So basically, progressive web apps, even though your network is so slow, yeah, it still loads super fast. That's also one thing to really note. This is a picture of Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world, I think, who ran a 100-meter race in about 10 seconds. So even though the network is slow, progressive web apps will still move fast because it has a super powerful caching support. So works perfectly on all smartphones. So you don't have to, for example, you know how you use it for I'll be doing with Flutter or React Native. You have to build and export for both Android and iOS different applications, because iOS supports their own extension and cannot install .apk on an iOS device, and you cannot install an iOS application on an Android phone. That's not possible. But here in progressive web apps, we have just a website. We have a web app. Then all we have to do is basically, as I said earlier in my slide, do something called by clicking this button, add into home screen. On the Android side, by you just clicking, on your Chrome or your Chrome on the Android side, just click. There's a part that shows you how many tabs you have opened on your Chrome. So click there. There's one that says add to home screen, then add to home screen. But on this iOS side, click this, add to home screen, and this appears, and that's that. It's really that straightforward. So uses less data than regular applications. So yes, as I said earlier, Progressive Web Apps also uses far less data than your regular applications, super less data than your regular applications than you, like the regular applications that you have. So because I said data are being cached locally on your phone, same way your Android apps, your native Android apps and your native iOS apps does it. But it's not just that; it's also fetching from a live server somewhere. Sorry. So it's not just fetching like just storing everything and all of the weight of this application is on your mobile phone. It's not just that; it's also fetching from somewhere else. So all the weight on your mobile phone. It also basically uses less data. That's Progressive Web Apps. Another beauty is, so we know how on our Android phones or iOS devices, when we install applications, they send us push notifications when certain things occur. So for Progressive Web App, this is also really possible. So Progressive Web App supports a push notification service via the service worker, which works on both Android and iOS. Remember, I said this is cross platforms. So it's a web app. It works. You can add to screen on both Android and both iOS. Android and iOS. So you can send push notifications to iOS and Android at the same time. And like both devices, it really doesn't matter the devices, they are all the same device and all downloading the same service worker. And basically, yeah. So you can send push notifications to both devices and just like regular mobile app that we build natively React Native or Flutter. So this is super different. But then it's again super lightweight. So another example is Twitter. So this is an application that's really being used by a whole bunch of people. So the Twitter app on the Android Play Store is worth 30 megabytes. And on the iOS app on the App Store is worth 112 megabytes. But the Progressive Web App for Twitter is 0.4 megabytes. Now think about that for a second. The Android app is worth 30 MB, the iOS app is worth 112, but then as a Progressive Web App, it's worth 0.4 MB. Think about that for a second. It's super lightweight. You like consume less data, you consume less space, you save a whole chunk of things when you are building your web app with with this kind of experience in mind. Things are being made easier when you think about all of these things. So since when Twitter allowed, okay, one thing I think I just remember this, I didn't add it to my slides, but I think about 2019. About in 2019, Twitter enabled support to be able to add Progressive Web Apps to the App Store. Yeah, you can now add Progressive Web Apps to the App Store, and it's that simple. So once you get your Progressive Web Apps ready and it's working perfectly, you can also add it to your App Store. As simple as that. Then you can basically just download it and you're basically getting Progressive Web Apps. That's possible. You can now host Progressive Web Apps on the App Store. That's super amazing. So with Twitter, since when they adopted the Progressive Web App strategy, they have 2 million. Basically, the time people spend on Twitter increased by a whooping 65%. That's a lot. And their daily visits increased to that's basically from the Progressive Web App to 2 million daily visit and 80% increase in tweets thanks to Progressive Web Apps still. Then also save 95% storage space of its users. So they are saving a whole 95% of storage of its users. Yeah. Oh, wow. I'm so sorry. It looks like I have to do something. I'm gonna sorry, something happened. 1 minute, sorry.
Sure, we can take a break. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of let him take care of what he's got to take care of. So far, I got his camera still on. I can check him when he comes back. Oh,
yeah, I'm back.
Perfect. Yeah. So
sorry about that. Well,
oh, you're good. You're good. I hope everything's okay.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, I'll go ahead and get you back on, and we'll let you continue the speech. And other than that, so far.
Okay. Are we back?
Yeah, we back. I think. Sorry, having some technical things on my end as well. So
okay.
I'll let you continue I'll let you continue the conversation. We'll go from there.
Awesome. Okay, so sorry everyone about that. Something happened over here that I had to handle real quick. So yeah, we're back. This is Progressive Web Apps, and please let's continue. So one of the key benefits of using progressive web apps is number one, cross-browser support. As I've said earlier, it works on diverse browsers. Like you don't have to, same way, for example, same way you can open facebook.com on your Chrome browser, you can open it on your Safari browser, on your Firefox, or your Tor browser, any browser you use. It's still like it's cross-browser, and you can all add to a screen on all of these browsers. It has this native-like experience. So this is one of the beauties of progressive web apps. There, you can literally find no difference in between the native app and the progressive web app. You can find little or no differences. So the only reason why there are certain limitations to what progressive web app can offer. That's why there's something that we have to just go straight to native app for. But to services where native apps can cover, and at the same time progressive web apps can cover, and you have to choose, I would say go for progressive web apps. Build a web app and make it progressive, and tell users to add it to your home screen and give them that mobile-like support, even though it's a web app. So they can both use the web app when they're anywhere, and they can also use it on their phone when they're with their phone. This is amazing, and I think this is something you should think about too when you're building your applications. So the next is offline support. So progressive web apps again allows offline support. So you have the ability to be able to add your applications to your phone. It then catches almost everything that it needs to catch. Then basically offline support. So even without your network, as we have here, no service, you can still use the application itself. You can still check out things. You can still read things. You can do a whole bunch of things. As simple as that. Then there's also the responsiveness part. It's super responsive as long as you build for responsiveness while creating the web app itself. Then again, push notification using progressive web apps. These are things you also have to think about. And yeah, so we have a whole bunch of browsers. So progressive web apps can be your home screen. Basically, progressive app can be added to your home screen via 95% of browser present today in the world. Yeah, from Chrome, from Firefox, from Edge, from Safari. Then there's the Safari logo. You can all add the progressive web apps from this browser directly to your mobile phone. Nevertheless, of your kind of phone, either an Android phone, an iOS phone, you can all add it to your screen. Even on the Windows phone, even though it's no longer being produced, you could add progressive web apps to your home screen on your Windows phone. So there's literally little or no end to what you can do with progressive web apps. It's super interesting. So by 2020, progressive web apps will replace 50% of all consumer-focused native apps. So this is what a research article said. And guess what? And yes, it has been achieved already. By today, 95%, a whole bunch of people are using progressive web apps to enhance productivity, to increase speed, to increase basically, yeah, cutting a lot of things short, things that you don't have to be native app for. Just make your present app progressive, and automatically, yeah, you get an application. You can also send it to the Play Store and host it there and get it locally, rather than asking users to like add it to the home screen. They can also go through that process. So a whole lot of things have changed since when progressive web apps came. I'm excited about all of this. So now let's get into some code. Now this is the part that's going to be super interesting. I hope we're ready. So let's go. So in the first session, we would so we're going to create an application, and our application is going to be wrapped around the Create React app. And I'm just going to be doing a whole lot of explanation of, yeah, the code base itself. So you have to do, so if you don't have Create React app installed globally, so you do npm install Create React app -g -g that's global. So installing globally in your system. Then once that's done, you initiate a new application called NIMBELLA React Workshop. So we're going to create, so npx Create React app, then the name of your application. Then yeah, so right about now I'm going to be going into the demo. So let's make this work. Okay, so I'm trying to my directory. I can't share my screen now, so just give me a minute. npx So right now, okay, I think, yep, we're ready. So I'm going to share. Okay, for some reasons, it looks like I cannot. Okay, I think I can share my entire screen.
All right. Let me know if you're having any trouble getting your stuff shared.
Yep, figured it out.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
Definitely go slow with this one because, like, you know, for people, we got like a lot of different people of all sorts of different like coding levels. So you might want to like take some time with this because, you know, this, not everyone might not know like the exact lines of code and what's going on.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna slow down in this place. I'm just gonna split everything like beats of a bit.
All right, take care.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Okay, so I'm gonna cd into my projects directory, so where I have most of my projects, and right now I'm gonna create my React app. So npx create React app, and the name of my application, the NIMBELLA workshop. So we're just gonna wait a while create React app installs. So what I did here is I went into I went to my projects directory and I used npx create React app into NIMBELLA workshop to basically I basically just created an application around NIMBELLA workshop. The name of my folder would be NIMBELLA workshop, but it's going to be wrapped around the create React app. So I said npx create React app NIMBELLA workshop. And right now it's being created. So once this is done, I'm just going to go over to my directory and bring the application up here. It's going to be that simple. So we're going to wait a while this happens.
Got a quick favor from the crowd. Could you zoom in on the code a little bit so we could be able to see it better?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Appreciate it.
Is it better?
Let me just go ahead.
I think it is. It's super big. Super big.
Yeah, that should be good. All right, appreciate it.
Awesome. So right about now, 1 minute. Stop sharing. I'm kind of opening my directory. So let's open. And awesome. So my directory is ready, and I'm going to share my screen back because we're ready. And yeah. Awesome. So we created a React app. We said npx create React app. Then we named our application. Remember, we named it NIMBELLA workshop. Oh, yeah, NIMBELLA React workshop. But the name of mine here is NIMBELLA workshop. So once we do that, it automatically makes the Git repo. Automatically makes the Git repo. So NIMBELLA workshop then gives the master branch, and you have all of these files here that we're going to explore. So working with like basically progressive web apps in React, I'm gonna explain every one of these files and how they work. So yeah, let's move forward. So if you go into one important thing that's important for like creating React apps is we must have this thing called Manifesto Json. This is basically what gives us the how should I put this, how basically the app is going to look like. Things that have to be the name of the application, the display, how the application starts, the colors, the images. This is where all of that happens. Inside the public folder, we have something called the Manifesto Json. So opening that file, we have all of this. So the short name is, so automatically, so this is going to be the name. Remember, when you have, like things like Facebook on our mobile phone, we have like Facebook. This is where it's been written. So let's name our application NIMBELLA. Then now we're gonna give it like the complete name. We're gonna see how this is gonna look like, and what basically just while I'm done, I'm gonna push the application so while everyone can see it and you can try adding it to your phone. And the second thing so this part of icons, so this icon say what kind of icons can be added, can be used. So first we have the favicon ICO. So this is like the image icon. And we also have this icon. We also have this icon. So logo and logo. So this same way we have like this logo. I think I showed you my slide where let's go back to the slides. Let me show you so everyone gets to see it. Let's go all the way back. So I showed you this. So when you click this, you add the home screen and you have this. So the icon that we have right here and here and here, basically they're all different sizes. And that's what is going to show up here when the basically is smart enough to pick the exact size we need and gives us basically the logo here. So write this. So this logo 192.512, they're all React logos. So right now we do not have to change all of this. So we are not going to change them. So the next is start URL. So they say, hey, so the first screen you're starting from is the index. So we had basically the start, like it's just the start page. That's where it's going to start from. No, there's no specific page. So if you want it to start from, let's say a page like, you're going to create it, let's say a new page like, I don't know, test.js or whatever. That's where basically it starts from. That we're gonna just basically put that in here. But then we say let's start from the origin, the app.js file. This is where everything should start from. So next is standalone display. This is how we want it. Then the theme color. Basically, theme color is the color of the bar. For example, if you have an iPhone X that has a notch, that notch part that's the theme color. The path from the notch upwards, and you have phones that have, when you look at your browser, the websites you open and the URL bar changes color. Yeah, so that's what they call theme color in that case. So the next is background color. And basically when you open your application, yeah, that color that shows first. For example, when you open Twitter, you see the Twitter logo in the center, and that logo that appears in the center is coming from one of these. The logo that appears in the center of your application when you firstly click it, like Twitter, is one of these ones. Then next, you have a color. So the logo would be white. Then the background color, let's say this one can be blue. But right now, let's have this as, I don't know. Let's Google this. Blue hex. So what? So blue hex code. So it looks like it's this one. Or yeah, I could just, there's this tool I use when I want to get color. So I use this one. I think this blue is really great. So I'm gonna pick this. So we're gonna put this color in here. So we're gonna get that blue. Then the theme color, I think let's give it a let's give the theme color the same color. I think, yeah, that's what I would do. Let's give it the same color. Then standalone display. So once that's done, let's commit changes. So let's say made few changes. What exactly? So change theme color. And basically, what we're doing right now is our commit message. So yeah, that's done. So the next thing is, so for any of these to even work, remember before any file, like these files have to communicate with each other. That's super important. They have to communicate with each other. So how this file is communicating with the main file itself is we go into index.html. So this is where the magic here works. Let's close this. We are not using this right now. Let's close this. So this is our index.html. So this is a whole lot of document. I usually delete this because it makes everything look so messy a bit. We're gonna remove all of that. So yeah, I think it looks more great. So we're gonna say remove comments. So now, yeah, we have all of this. So for this manifest to even work at all, we have to reference it in our index.html file. So over here, we are using the link rel. The name of this is manifest, which is on basically name of the file manifest. Then public URL, then manifesto.json. And basically we're just adding this to the main file. So before anything gets executed at all, this gets executed. Before anything at all gets executed, this gets executed. And since we've imported our manifesto.json, so remember, once you create your manifesto.json file, once you're done setting this up, you have to go into your index.html file, and yeah, basically just reference the manifesto.json file here if it's not there already. So reference it, and yeah, save that. Then you're all done there. It's really that simple. So the next step is we're gonna go into a little bit of code so on the terminal side. So we're gonna do something called npm run build. basically, this is gonna build the whole application here and give us a build folder, as we have here already. So we're just gonna wait a while this happens. And yeah, boom, it's done. We're done. So it's really that simple. So over here in our build folder is basically what gets served, as simple as that. So our Manifesto Json file is still here under the build. And one important thing is, so the next step is I want to show you how basically what service worker would look like when you're trying to think like offline support, when you're going to show how you're going to know basically my app is progressive web apps. Okay, one other thing is I didn't show you the display of what we have already, and I think I want to show you that. So remember launching an app, you say yarn starts. So we're gonna server on localhost 8000 or 3000 rather. Okay, this is the wrong page. Okay, so this is opening up right here. Okay, so this is network. It's not usually meant to be this slow. Okay, so definitely it's never meant to be that slow, but that's what's used in network. So we have so basically this is what we have. This is what it looks like. So let's inspect. Let's see if there's anything like, for example, when you click this, all that shows is this sent to so these are my devices. I want to send this website there. Then we have how to bookmark. So I'm going to show you something that's going to be added once we initiate our service worker. But for now, this is all we have here. So I'm just showing you that. So let's change this to the iPhone X. So we just have like this display here. So then we go on the part of the application. So this might take a while because a lot of things are running right now on my system. So it's going to take a little while. So while that is going, so yeah, we now have our build file. So we're going to basically be launching our build file. We're going to be serving our build file in a browser so you can basically see an output on how, because you might be wondering where the service worker is. So right now you might be like, hey, where is exactly the service worker that I spoke about? So outside our build, so we can search all around. There's a service worker here, but we're not really going to do anything with this one yet. We're going to work on the build service worker. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. But for now, let's take a look at this. So right now, there is like nothing works. There is no cache, like there's no cache storage. Under our service worker, there's literally nothing. There's literally nothing here. So this is service worker from other origins. If you click this is like other origins. This has nothing to do with what we're doing right now. So that's other like service worker from my laptop itself. So let's close this. This is the regular one. Now let's go back to our application. No, next we're gonna install something called the HTTP server. The HTTP server. So we're gonna do npm So basically, this is going to help us serve our build on a unique HTTP server on a 127.0, .0.1. That should give us, I'm not really sure of the IP, but once we serve, we should definitely see that. So we're going to wait a second. This is always each time super fast to really install. So we're installing this as one of our package dependencies. So you're going to see it up here, dependencies somewhere here. Once this is done, so let's wait a while. So this shouldn't take so long. Okay, so while that's going on, let's keep on exploring the code that we have right now.
Hey, sorry to hate to cut off. So your time is almost running up. So like I probably have to give like a 5-minute warning. So whichever thing you want to showcase in the next 5 minutes, I'd recommend like highlighting it then. Cool.
Got it.
Just give you a quick heads up.
Awesome. So I'm gonna really move so like super fast, and also gonna really explain well. But yeah. So while this is done, we're gonna install the HTTP server here. That's basically gonna help us have served basically all we have on a unique URL, so we can set up our service worker. So while we wait for this to install, we're gonna set up our service worker almost immediately. So the next process while this installs is that we're gonna create another start script that says start service worker. So SW, and we're gonna create a script saying HTTP server. Then it should rot build. So yeah, That's that. Then before we go all of that, so am I wondering why a lot of things might not work? So the next thing is we are going to go all the way into our, let's see here, forgetting, I think. Yep. So the next is we need to register our service worker. So usually React comes without the service worker being registered. So before the service worker itself can even work, you have to register the service worker. So we're gonna now register the service worker. So we're gonna say add register service worker, and so yeah, what else did we do? Yeah, add HTTP server. We're gonna commit that while this, so it's a pretty heavy package. So that's why it's taking a while. So we cannot have a preview. The next preview we're gonna have is basically just this. I'm just gonna show you that service worker has been served, and while that is going on, yeah, we're just gonna once this is done, we're just gonna build applications from the start and serve with basically start with a service worker. We're gonna build this file. This is what we're building right now, and this is the preview. The preview we're gonna get is gonna be from this build file, and you're gonna see that in a minute. Okay, so while this goes on, and so one key thing again in my progressive web I've been talking about since is, so the goal is really to be able to build this fast system by which you'll be able to deliver applications seamlessly and super fast. You'll be able to, while you're building applications, small React applications like this, you can also build this to a point where you'll be able to handle the applications we are building on your phone. So it's been accessible like easily anywhere you go. So you can even add it to your home screen, like your front screen. So once you unlock your phone, next thing you see is the application you need. You might build a personal application. Probably you need it to anything else. It can just be a simple calculator that has some special features that you need personally. You can just build it, make it a progressive web app, make it open source, and just put it on your home screen and just like get it anytime you want. It's super fast and really accessible to you anytime you need it, just like a regular mobile app. Okay, so it looks like this is almost done. So we can get the preview. Is a really heavy application. Remember the name of the application, name of the package is HTTP server. So while this gets done super fast, so awesome. Yeah, we're done. We're done with that, and we can look into our package file. We have where is it? So we have it. So we have the dev dependencies available here. So we're gonna rebuild our application from the start. So we're gonna rebuild all of like basic applications. So we're gonna say npm run build, and we're gonna say npm run start or SW. So when we're typing so fast, this happens. Awesome. So basically it's going to be rebuilding the script. It's going to be rebuilding our build. Then starting on basically just starting the service worker. We're going to have a preview, and that's it. So awesome. Yeah, it runs fast. So starting up HTTP server serving build. So available on 1.7.0. So it's serving on ETAC. So let's open this right up here. The exact same application, but guess what? It's starting to build. And remember, I showed you something that we just had this to here. Now we have a service worker configured. We can now even add to home screen. So remember this NIMBELLA workshop is the exact same thing we have in our manifesto. So name here. Then this is the IP itself. We get that. Now let's check the last thing before I end. So we inspect, and let's go under application. Let's take a look. Remember, I showed us that the service worker wasn't active, and now you're going to see that it's active after setting up the service worker in the processes that I've done already. Now we have 3, and over here we just have this 2. So it looks like something is not found. Okay, that's that. This should load up any minute from now. So yeah, I think that's everything. This has been added here, and we initiated the web. Okay, it's done already. So now remember, I said we didn't have a service worker initiated when I showed you this, and secondly, in this part we didn't have a build catch. So now when you click on service worker, as you can see here, it says service worker on 127.0.8080. That's this. So service worker.js is active and is running. As simple as that. So basically it's working perfectly. So the next thing is catch. So the next is catch. Remember I said we can also, there's a catching feature that we also have to work on via workbox. It's automatically initiated in the default service worker. So clicking this, you can see every single thing that has been cached. And so
go
yeah,
ahead and so that's okay. Sorry to interrupt. I was going to go let you know that your time is up for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
No, you covered a lot. Like you definitely went over like a lot of different aspects. Not only having the slides, but also having like the actual code itself, and kind of showcasing little bits and pieces of that. I do appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Yeah, so for any resources that you might need, just go over to Developer.io NIMBELLA React Workshop, and this is the web dev resources. Are just resources. You can just find every of this online, and just basically get more resources online and get to build React apps. I'm also available for questions, and so thank you for having me on board. You can catch me on Twitter and GitHub as Developer.io. So thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
All right, I will go ahead and like the chat will be up, so you can go ahead and ask questions and all that.
That was intense.
No, that wasn't intense. That was a lot going on. And it seemed like there were some technical things going on in the background. I hope everything is good on your end,
Yeah. It's just something happened. But we're all good here. We're good.
I mean, honestly, like it wouldn't be a live webinar if like something didn't break. So like
Yeah, kind of like, so funny enough, I practice all of this even because like most times, so before I do any workshop, I always love to practice them. Even though they are really basic, I always love to practice them to make sure I don't forget anything. So just to avoid anything failing. And even as live workshops, you must always be happy enough to ask the audience questions and just Google what you forget.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I keep a script by me all times. Anytime I do like webinars, it's just a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I always have my iPad with me anytime I'm doing a webinar. So in case I forget anything, I jotted it down, just gonna remember. It's not a bad thing.
Oh yeah. Well, I tell you what. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a good rest of the day. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce the next speaker right here.
Okay.
All right, take care. Okay, so the next speaker that we got, who I'm pretty excited about, name is Radislav Stankoff. He is the head of engineering at Product Hunt, which, if you're not familiar with Product Hunt, is a website I would absolutely recommend checking out, especially if you just kind of want to keep up to date on all sorts of different tech that you're interested in, regardless if it's programming or pretty much any kind of tech in general. So let me go ahead and bring him on board. All right, Radislav, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Do you hear me well? The usual start of a new conversation.
Oh, that's always great. Like, you have someone come on the webinar and their mouth is just moving and there's no sound. It's like, that's always a good start to a good conference.
Yeah. I mean, being muted is not the best presentation.
Yeah. I'm just happy that my camera hasn't just decided to shut down randomly, which has happened in the past. So, well, I tell you what, I see that your screen is already shared. And I'm looking forward to your presentation. So you're going to be talking about you'll be going over how you built your app and how you went from web to mobile, which I'm really excited about because I use Product Hunt. I check it weekly. I think it's a great website to like learn about a whole bunch of ton of stuff coming out. So I'm looking forward to seeing how your team handled going from web to mobile.
Cool. Okay. Great. I'm starting then. So yeah. Hello, everybody, and yeah, my name is Radislav Stankoff. If you can find me on the internet by R Stankoff pretty much everywhere. Like already mentioned, I'm head of engineering at Product Hunt. I live in Bulgaria, over here, and today I'm going to talk about React Native. But I want to start a bit more about architecture. I want to focus how we started architecturing React Native at Product Hunt in the last couple of months. So every time we talk about architecture, the key thing you have to think about is the context. Like you cannot build a successful architecture without knowing what you built for. And the focus of the things I'm going to talk about is the product we have been working for the last year and a half, Your Stack. This is like a new product we are developing at Product Hunt. And I already have given a talk about the Product Hunt architecture for the web, and it works quite well. We are very happy with the architecture for the web application. And the next step when you have like a successful web app is to go mobile. And in order to do this, we were thinking a lot, what should we do? The current app is still in beta, so please don't tell anybody that. We're just testing the UI of it. We're playing with the app and wanted to see where it's going to be released. I was hoping that we have it live for this event, but it's still in beta, so don't tell anybody about the app. So when we were starting of building the new app, we had two choices. Basically, should we go Swift or should we go React Native? Those are our two choices. We already tried React Native like 2 years ago, 3 years ago with the Product Hunt mobile app, and we had pretty crappy experience back then. It was one of the bad mistakes we have done in Product Hunt's history, technology-wise, and we were very worried about a lot of the issues. So we decided to do a spike to just test if React Native have moved in the last 2 years. And it turns out they did. Like they have fixed a lot of issues which we had 2-3 years ago. The other thing we had to consider is that we had only 2 developers with some Swift experience and 0 developers with Android experience. So also, since we are big GraphQL fans, the library of choice for GraphQL for us is Apollo, and they have a version for Swift, but it's not very good, to be honest. Also, our team already know how to solve a lot of the problems around our product in React and Apollo. Also, we needed to do a lot of UI iteration and experiments, because on mobile, we wanted not just to take the mobile website and put it in an app. We wanted to have a bit more tuned mobile experience. And for this, we needed to iterate a lot in the UI. And from my experience with Swift and Apple technologies, it's the view layer is the worst layer to build stuff on top of it. It's really hard to iterate, and React is a lot more easier. So what we decided was, okay, let's iterate with React Native and see how far we can go. Also, we needed to have an Android at some point. So we decided to go with React Native, and so far it looks like it was the better choice. As I mentioned, React Native have moved quite a bit in the last 2-3 years. So the tech stack we have in our mobile app is, again, React with React Native. We use GraphQL to get data via Apollo. The whole app is TypeScript. We use Jest for unit testing, of course, Prettier. And we use this tool, Fastlane, which is a very popular tool for basically building mobile pipelines. It's the tool which can, just with one command, we can deploy to the App Store. And when we started building on the architecture and what we wanted to have our app to be, I always show this image for architecture when you are in the React world. It's basically you have to build the Eiffel Tower with these IKEA thingies. It's really hard. And when you start making decisions, you should very carefully map your features and your architecture early on, so you don't get into this point where you don't have nowhere to go. And for our system, we have this motto of moving fast and having breakfast. So having we are moving fast, but we are having a healthy lifestyle at that. And again, moving fast, just driving home. So every time our principles for architecture are, we have to have very good defaults. We have to have good code organization. We have to make the common operations easy. We have to isolate dependencies, and we have to focus on extensibility, usability in the code we work. This is especially important because we are a very small team. But the most important thing in our architecture is making the common operations easy. Every time a developer has to do something which is a very popular thing to do in our application, it should be easy. It should be a no-brainer. There should be 0 brain cycles wasted on it. It should be a pleasure. When I think about architecture, especially in the React world, I see 3 buckets of things we have to think about. Those are the support libraries and utilities, the components themselves, the reusable parts, and the screens themselves, like the mobile application, come from the screens. And this is something we basically took like a mindset from the web. And the way I see this is a pyramid where you have a lot of support code, which, to be honest, a lot of that can be actually shared between web and mobile. You have a lot of components, which in our case, we don't share between web and mobile, but it's the pinch line. It's basically the reusable components, and they combine into screens. So this is like one of my mental images when I think about that. If you remember this auto animation Voltron, the support is the pilots who drive the components, and the components combine into screens. So this is the folder structure of the application. This is how our mobile app looks like. So if you're a developer on our team, this is what you're going to see here. And if you split this, and I have color-coded it, you notice how much things are support. Of course, we have one for components, and we have pages, which are screens. So again, talk is cheap, and I actually want to show you some of the codes and the things we have. And I would start from the top, because a lot of the support and components pattern would start making a lot more sense if you see them used in action. So the first thing with screens is the app file. This is basically the entry point of our application. We decided to go originally with React native navigation, which wasn't a good choice. But after that, we found out React navigation, which was a lot better choice for our needs. And this is the navigation we decided to go in with, React navigation native. So this is like a short version of our main screen. What we have is we have all our screens in the screens folder, and we basically spread all those screens definitions into a whole stack. And this basically defines our whole application. And this is basically the entry point of the app. This is like start the app here. And what screen activity is coming from this screens folder where we put all our screens. And the screens here are just exports by them. We just export them all. And every screen is just a folder with private components used just for this screen. So if a component is not needed anywhere else except in this one screen, we just keep it in the screens folder. All our screens are flat structured. We don't nest screens. Also, we have the query file, which is the GraphQL query I'm going to show a bit later, and an index file. And if we think about screens are basically state machines. Like the screens start from a layout, then they have like a loading state. They need to get some data from the server. In some unfortunate cases, there might be an error state, which might be a server error or something, a resource is not found, or the user is not logged in, or they don't have an access to something, or we get into the loaded state and we have to render the page. So every screen has to pass to all those states. We have to pretty much handle all the loading animations, all the settings the same way. So what we decided to do, and this is something we directly copied as an idea from the web, is to have this function which generates a screen definition. So basically what this thing does is you give it a name, which is used for the router. You can give it optionally a GraphQL query and parameters. You can say, okay, which is the React component I need to render? What type of screen this is? And this is very important. In our application right now, we have 3 types of screens. We have a screen which is just a push screen, like being the normal push. We have a screen which we called action sheet because it's just open from the bottom. And we have the overlay, which is just an overlay thing where we can put whatever we want. Also, we support like custom backgrounds, titles, and there is this safe area property for the iPhones. On some screens, we need to have like a safe area. In other screens, we don't. And this create screen handles everything. So the structure of our application is we have the screens folder, the name of the screen, it has its file, it goes to screens, and then to the app. And this is how a screen looks like. Basically, you define, it's a description what you need to get for the screen to work. And this is actually our real home feed. So this one uses a query, it gets a lot of data. It uses a custom component called with search. What basically this component does is it has like a search field on the top. And when you search, it doesn't render its children. And it's a very simple and it was very useful abstraction here. And since we are using TypeScript, it's very easy for us to get type safety. And getting all the data, we use GraphQL, like this is our secret sauce. Because our backend uses Ruby on Rails. It is our GraphQL server, and we use Apollo to create TypeScripts of definition. Like we use Apollo CodeGen to generate types. So basically what happens is if we have a GraphQL fragment, which is a definition of GraphQL fields on a resource, from this fragment, we can generate a TypeScript file, and then we can import this file type in our app, and we can make sure that we have the data we need. And the nice thing about GraphQL is if the GraphQL server doesn't returns an error if it doesn't return the schema you expect. So for me, that's one of the best things ever, because we can define fragments for every component we have. And the nice thing about those fragments is they can be nested inside of each other. And you can have a lot of fragments and then combine those fragments into a single query. So imagine a query in GraphQL Ant is this. Definition of what I want from the server split into multiple parts, which if you think about it is, okay, I have a screen, and this screen has multiple components, and every component tells the screen or its parent component what data it needs. So we have this tree of data we just need, and every component is very isolated. And from this, we generate TypeScript, and this is like magic, because it's very easy for us to not have no pointer exceptions. It's very easy for us to actually develop new components and get data. Another thing we have is this definition of routes. So the idea here is we have export of functions which perform transitions to different screens. Because the way React navigation works is you have to pass quite a bit of options here. And for a lot of screens, they need certain type of data to be passed to the screen to work. Like, for example, the login screen may take a reason to log in, or the profile needs a profile ID. And those routes are just defined as simple function. And again, due to TypeScript, they're all type safe. And we have a couple of helper functions and hooks to be able to use those to navigate through our application. So in our app, what we do is we can import from routes and just call those functions and go to the routes. And this gives us very flexibility in terms of knowing that we give the right parameters to every route. You cannot get to a route without its proper parameters. And this is how it might look in a real component. We can have, we are very big into using hooks, by the way. So we used our useNavigate hook to give us a function to navigate. And when you press on touchable opacity component, you go to this route. And this is so popular that we actually have this built into our core button component, which I'm going to talk about a bit later, where you can just say, okay, button 2, and you just say, okay, this button goes to this route. And when I talk about components, this is the level down. The folder components is all the components we have which are reusable. This is the components which are meant to be used in more than one place. If a component is used in a single place, that single place is most probably its screen. It shouldn't be in components. And that's our main differentiation of the screen. It's basically stuff that I can just copy paste and use in different places. And every component we have is a directory. In this directory, we can have subcomponents. We can have subdirectories of components, but we don't use those subdirectories. We can only import the top level components. We also, every component, a lot of the components have their fragments, like the data they need from the server. They also, a lot of those components who actually perform data changes have mutations, and they have their style definitions or their utility functions. Excuse me. Yeah. One component we have is text, and this is the component which represents our text. And it's a wrapper around the React Native text component. So we want our UI to be very consistent. So what we did was we created our own text component on top of React Native text component, where we allow only sizes which are the ones we are allowed to use in the app. Like we have 7 sizes of fonts, or we have only certain colors that we allow. Also, our text component is aware of the theme. This is something I'm going to cover in the end. And this is how you use it. You can just say, okay, I have a bold text. It's size L, which means large, and the color is black. And the nice thing about this component is if I have, when a user is on dark mode, the text is not black. It's, I think, a shade of gray. It's a config we have. Another component which we have, and it's basically the definition of a command, is our button component. And the way we use buttons is a bit different than other places I have seen use buttons, because our buttons actually, a lot of places use buttons just as styling. And we actually have, our button actually combines business logic and it combines styling as well. So as I showed you, you can say, I have a button to this page. Also, I can have a button which on press receives a function. If this function returns a promise, this button waits and is disabled until this promise resolves. So we don't have a double tap problem. Also, we can say confirm. So when you click the button, you get a confirmation window. And this is actually a custom UI. It's not just like a normal alert. Or we say this button requires the current user to log in. If the user is not logged in, we show them a model and we ask them to log in. Also, our button can understand GraphQL. So we can say this button executes this mutation with this input. And when the mutation is done, do this. And of course, we have styles for our buttons. And the way we have it is with namespacing the component. So we have these 4 types of buttons in our system. We have a button text, which is just a text you can click, a button which is an icon, a button which is a solid, and an outline button. And this also is very helpful for consistency. Another component we have is a layout component for a layout. We have a component which wraps the yoga layout. So we can have a flex with a row, a flex with a column. We also have a flex which expands, which was a very useful thing to have. We also have flex which creates a grid like multiple icons. And we have this flex text, which is, you have this issue where if you have a text and it's not properly, and it doesn't have the proper flex properties, sometimes the text get cut in bad places. So this flex text is the place we put the text where comes from a user content, and we this makes sure the text can fit. And the way we split our logic is we don't split our components into containers, not containers. We have all the components in a single folder. And every component have like utility, styling, and domain logic. Like, for example, we have a like button, which uses the button component. And this like button is used in an answer card component. And all of those are reusable components, like the stack card component is something usable. Reusable, it's a domain component, which has its own business logic of what data it needs. We have the like button, which takes its data and runs. And for example, this is a screen, and this is how the screen looks like. We have a reusable component called dismiss keyboard, which is a component which is a keyboard aware. So if in this screen the user can open the keyboard, this component makes it so if the user tap anywhere on the screen, the keyboard dismisses. We have our infinite scroll component, we have our card component. The card component itself have a flex column because it's a column. Then it has like a flex row in the bottom. And there we have like a button solid, and this button solid has both icon and text components. And this all builds on top of each other. It kind of sounds like atomic design, but it's very kind of. We don't do a lot of splitting. For us, we have only generic components and domain components. Those are the two definitions, but those components are both reusable. Those are the components we only care about. And the final thing I want to talk to you about is the support. And the support is basically all the utilities we have in our application. And we have this folder utils where we have a lot of reusable functions. They are not very interesting. I think a lot of you guys have it. We are very big users into hooks. We have a lot of those hooks. And the utility I want to focus on is styling. Like, styling is something we wanted our app to have a consistent layout, basically the whole app. So in styles, we have support for styling. Like every component, we have this interface, which is called iStyles, iSpacing, sorry. And this allows certain components which use this interface to accept properties for spacing. Like, for example, our flex component, button component, and text component. Like some of our core components accept this margin left, or margin right, or padding left. And these values are only the ones we allow. We don't allow numbers. And this makes our spacing very easy. It's very easy to just make a list of buttons and add spacing between of them. And the whole spacing of the whole app is very consistent. Now, a bit of warning here. Having these spacings is very specific to mobile. We only have this on mobile. Our web doesn't use those because our flex component, which we have on the web, have a property called gap, which adds gap between all the items in its list. Unfortunately, the Yoga Flex framework doesn't allow this yet. When they allow it, I would be very happy to not have this complexity, but having it, it's for us was a life. It saves us a lot of time. This is how this spacing interface looks like. It's basically a lot of properties that are supported and a function which just expands a custom style. So a component who wants to support the styling just have its props inherit from the props of that style, and its style just gets from those props. The other thing we wanted to support from day one is support for dark mode. And to support dark mode, we use this library called React Native Dynamic. It's a very useful library for accessing theming. And this is how the library will look using it like a very plain one. You can create a dynamic style sheet, you give it colors, And then you can use this dynamic style sheet to get the colors. And what we do is we have a list of colors which are theme aware. And also we have a hook which can get the color if we just need the color value. And this is how our styles colors look like. Like we have a table of all the colors which are here. All the colors have to be dynamic values. They have to support dark mode. Some of the colors have the same value for dark mode and light mode, but that's fine. We don't allow any other colors outside of here. And we have a couple of utilities like this use color to be able to get the colors. And having all those pieces I shared with you now, like, are the things which combine our application. So I went a bit quick here, but let me recap. The linchpin of our architecture is GraphQL. And some of the key takeaways here are having the screen, a create screen helper was amazingly great for us. It made it so much easier to create a screen, to navigate to the screen, to work. When we work with components, every component is very isolated. And we have a whole directory trees for every component. So yeah, thank you for your attention. And that's all. All my slides are already uploaded at my speaker deck profile at speakerdeck/r/Stankoff. And if you are guys interested, I would also share them in Twitter in like 10 minutes after my talk is ready. So thank you very much.
All right, so thank you so much for that presentation. That was actually really good.
Thank you.
Cool. So we actually ended up getting a handful of questions for you. So let me go ahead, and we have a little bit of time to actually read them off.
Great.
All right. So first question, what testing frameworks would you recommend, and how do you structure your test?
Okay, so for testing, what we use right now is Jest. And we mostly use Jest to test our utility libraries. We don't really test the React components by themselves. And this is the same for the mobile, and this is the same for the web. And for React, what we are trying to do for the native app is we are still searching. I'm still not very happy with the state of the testing tools there. What we want to test is end-to-end tests for the whole components plus screens. We are still searching for good end-to-end solution. What we currently test in the React components is the hooks. So we have this rule that we basically use only functional components, and we we have a very heavy use of hooks. And what we do is we unit test the hooks in isolation, because the hooks are usually the things that can break in a component, because they're the domain logic. They have a very simple entrance and output. And for the rest, we just have TypeScript to have our type safety. This still doesn't remove the need to end-to-end, but I still haven't found a very great tools for end-to-end on mobile.
Yeah, and you actually have some people in the chat actually agreeing with you that Jest actually is very good. So you got people backing you up.
Yeah.
All right, so second question. Person said, I am working on Angular. I've been working on Angular for the past 2 years, and I find it difficult to switch from Angular to React. What other things do I need to keep in mind before starting with React?
Yeah, I mean, Angular is very different from React from what I remember. I haven't worked with Angular for the last 3-4 years. And I think you have to know about React is that React is only half of the story. Like React gives you just the component structure and the UI layer. And with React, you have to think about pure functions. You should not think like side effects. You should think about how to split your logic into smaller usable components, which in perfect case only have properties and render stuff. Of course, that's not always possible. The most interested component have logic, but you should force yourself to have a bit more isolation and work around that. And again, in the React world, you need to use extra libraries which come from third parties, where in Angular, a lot of things are baked in. But the positive thing here is you have a lot more choices and a lot more things that might suit you better the way you like that.
Oh, someone just asked an interesting question. What do you think about testing library? Would you prefer Jest over testing library?
I mean, we use both Jest and testing library. Like, testing library is great. Like, testing library is just utilities for testing, and Jest is a test runner. So we use them as a piece, because basically Jest is the thing which runs the test, have the describe it and the whole syntax and the whole way to handle when assertion is wrong. And the testing library is like set up the React components, set up the world, and run the exceptions.
All right. So we got time for one more question. This one is from Vincent. He asked, how do you deal with partial entities returned by your fragment in terms of typing?
So the GraphQL server actually ensures that we don't get partial responses. Like, in some cases, some fields might not be available. Those cases, the fields are null, but you actually are very explicit in the GraphQL schema definition on the server which fields can return null and which fields cannot return null. And if some field returns, for example, partial response, the GraphQL server checks if the response it's going to return is the one the client wanted. If it's not, the server errors out that it cannot generate that response. And then in create page, we have an error raised by Apollo. And in create page, this is the place where we catch this error and we present it to the user. Like, we interrogate the errors from the GraphQL and we present this error to the user in the appropriate way. Like, if it's a server blow up because it cannot generate something, maybe we give it an option to retry 1 or 2 times, or just go back to the previous screen.
Okay, well, thank you for answering that question. I see you do have a few more in the chat. You might want to go ahead and, when we go ahead and remove you from the screen, you might want to go ahead and answer some of those, because like we are out of time for you for the Q&A section. But I just do want to say thank you so much for like joining us and giving this presentation. Do you have any last things you'd like to say before you head out?
Yeah, that was fun. Have a great day, evening, whenever you are, guys. See ya.
See ya. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get ready to introduce our next speaker here in a sec. But I do want to make like 2 quick announcements before I do that. So I have mentioned before that you can receive a certificate for participating in this event. I will be giving out the instructions for how to receive that certificate at the end of the event, like once we get done with the last speaker, which will be 2 speakers, which will be James and then Eric. So, and another thing that I just want to go ahead and talk about real quick as far as one of our community partners goes. So I'm going to share that. So for one of our community partners for React Vancouver, as I had mentioned before, they are currently looking for speakers. So if you yourself are a speaker who speaks on React and you want to showcase a session that you have, definitely feel free to message them and let them know what your session is about. And don't worry, I won't make you type all of that manually. I'll be sure to post that link in the actual chat itself. So if you yourself like to give a presentation, definitely feel free to hit them up. All right. So got that out of the way. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker, his name is JQ Quick. He is the Senior Dev Advocate for Auth0, which is an amazing platform for building secure login functions for your app. And he also runs like a really amazing YouTube channel where he discusses like a wide range of topics in regards to programming. And in this talk, he's going to be talking about how to make your React app more secure. So let me go ahead and bring James on. James, man, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Doing great. So I like the lighting you got going on. I've not seen like this purple thing you got going.
Thanks. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I see you already got your screen shared, and I will go ahead and let you get started.
Cool. I want to make sure. I thought I had all my notifications turned off, and then I just got a message from my wife that showed up on here, which I don't want people to see. So how's it going, everyone? If you're in the chat, let me know. Just say hi. Let me know that you're there. I've got the chat up, so I will see that as I talk. And if you have comments, especially if you have funny comments or entertaining comments to some extent, please feel free to share them. I'll keep an eye out. Makes me happy to see people that are engaged and paying attention, and also get a few laughs along the way. So shout out to everybody in the chat. Be active there. I'd appreciate it. And we'll go ahead and get started. So we're talking about React security implications that you need to know about, to think about, to plan for, to make sure that your React applications are as secure as possible. So a little bit about me. I got a little bit of an intro already, but I'm a developer, a speaker, and a teacher, and I've done a combination of those things professionally for about 7 years now. I'm currently a developer advocate at Auth0. We'll talk a little bit about Auth0 in this talk, and what I do there is content. I do talks. Would do a lot of in-person activities, but with COVID, doing much more of this virtual stuff, but just general engagement with the community. And then I also get to kind of represent two other really cool companies in Twilio and then Cloudinary. So I'm a Twilio champion and a part of the media developer expert that is sponsored by Cloudinary. And you'll hear about those technologies as well as Auth0 a bit in this talk as well. So if you need anything about me, I am James Q Quick on social media and YouTube channel and Twitter and Instagram and GitHub and all that stuff. And you can find other information about me on my site at jamesqquick.com, including the slides for this talk. So I'll have a link to that in the end, but if you go to jamesqquick.com and then go to my speaking or my talks page, you'll see a reference up there for this talk, and you can go and grab the slides. I'm going to make sure my iPad is muted, which it was not. All right, hopefully pretty good there. So let's see. Let's build an app. This is a React focused set of sessions. So let's build an app, and let's say I want a website where developers can share their desk setups. And people in the chat, if you've kind of followed some of my streams or my content or things I talk about on Twitter, you may have seen this idea I have of dev setups. This has actually changed a lot. This graphic here looks more like this now, which I'm really excited about. I just was working on this before we started, so I think it looks pretty cool. But the idea is lots of people post their desk setups on Twitter, and then you get like comments of people's photos of their desk setups, and those are really cool, except there's no like long-term way to find out what those desk setups are after you get done with that post. So what I mean is, like, you can go through a Twitter post and you see it, but there's no great way to then find that stuff again. So I wanted to build a site that would kind of be the central place for people to upload their desk setups. I see a comment in the chat from Brian, who's participated in desk setups. He has his desk on there. So you can too. I'll give you the link to this in a second. But thinking about building this thing, I wanted it to be super cool, right? Just the most amazing app. I want it to be super performant. It's going to load and save a bunch of images, so I want it to work really well. I want this to have really good user experience. And then lastly, I want it to be secure, whatever secure means in the end. So if you want to find kind of the alpha, I don't have a formal word for this, alpha version of the site, it's at dev-setups.netlify.app. I'll get a real domain and all that stuff eventually, but you can go and check it out. You can sign up. You can submit an image of your setup, and it has to be approved by an admin. But if you want to be on this page, you can go and do that too. So that's what we're going to talk about, is just the idea of building that app. And so the first part is you have an idea, and then you probably get to like, all right, well, where do I start? Well, I started with asking a friend of mine to do some mock-ups of a design. That's one of my biggest weaknesses. I don't really know where to start when I have a new app idea in terms of design. So I asked a friend, hey, would you mind just doing kind of a mock-up here of what this might look like? And again, I've changed this a little bit, but that's kind of where I started. So after that, we're developers. We're at a React conference, a React event. So you probably start writing some code, and you probably are using React. So as you start to maybe stub this out, just kind of focused on the skeleton or the UI of what the user is going to see. Maybe you create the code that has the hero, the thing that says like, hey, welcome to the page. And then maybe you have an image gallery like I showed in there. And then in this case, there's a piece of text to say like, if you get to the end of that. All of that said, the next thing you need to do is after you kind of have that laid out is like, all right, where do I actually save this data? So we've started to stub out a front end. Now we need to actually save images and records and things like that. So I like to share, there's lots of cool data store options out there, things like Firebase, and I've used Airtable a lot for demos. It's actually the one that I use for this one. Postgres and FaunaDB and Mongo and Trello as a kind of a weird one. I've done a demo of using Trello as a database before. And then lastly, Cloudinary, which will be kind of important in this demo as well. So those are just some cool different data store options if you're looking for kind of a backend database for your app. And then I talk a lot about Jamstack. So a lot of that gets into headless CMS options. And I just kind of like to throw this out there just because I'm a big fan of these. And then I myself specifically use Sanity for my personal site that you can, again, go and see the information for the slides. So if you start to use any of these things, let's say you start with Trello and there's an SDK for Trello, an API or a library in NPM that you can download. And so you use it and you configure a new Trello client and you use your application key and your user token, whatever that is. And something similar, if you're going to use Cloudinary to create your Cloudinary object that you're going to work with, you'll need an API key and an API secret, whatever those things are. If you're using Sanity, you'll need a project ID and a token and blah, blah, blah. And so you see all these different names, API key and secret key and app ID and auth token. And if you're like me, first time you've heard of these things, you're kind of like, I don't really know what to do with those. Well, that gets us into lesson number 1 here is you never want to send any private credentials to the browser in JavaScript. So any of those secret credentials like an API key or an API secret, anything that you need to keep to yourself, you need to keep to yourself. So that means don't check it in the source code. And it also means don't include it in your JavaScript that goes to the browser. And the reason for this is we're developers here. And you may or may not be aware, but there's a lot of developer ninjas out there that are just looking for these kind of credentials. They can grab your API keys, they can grab your auth tokens or your secrets, and then they could go use them to basically do whatever you want, whatever they want. And so what do you do with these things? Well, you want to include them typically as environment variables inside of your server or your backend, or in this case, in Netlify. Wherever it is, you want to make sure that those secret credentials are stored somewhere that is secret and safe and not being sent to the browser in front-end JavaScript or in your React application. All right, so we've kind of established we're going to use whatever database, or we talked about some database options. We're going to use the SDK, the client package, to be able to interact with that thing. We'll save those secret credentials and environment variables. Let's start to add some validation to the input that we might ask from the user. Because simply put, users can't be trusted. No matter what you present to them that you think makes sense, they will probably use it in a way that you didn't think of. So an example of this is on the site. If you visit someone's profile page, I wanted to give the ability for a user to upload a uses link. And this is usually a link on someone's website where they list out all the tech that they use in their desk setup, lights and cameras and mics and stands and desks and chairs and all that kind of stuff. And so with that, I want to make sure that people are uploading, as part of this, a valid URL. So maybe we give like a little flash message to say, hey, if you try to add a URL that's not a real valid URL, we want to flag that and just give that message to the user. Well, that's cool. There's also maybe if they upload an image that's too big, we want to kind of restrict the size of the image that gets uploaded. So maybe we can say something like, hey, that image is too big, try uploading a smaller one. Just a simple message there. And then we could take this a step further, where we could disable this button to make sure that users aren't even able to submit something until we, the application, the code, knows that those inputs are safe or meet whatever criteria we have. So at this point, you got this stuff working and you feel like you're kind of controlling the user input, you're guiding the user in the right direction, and you're kind of clapping for yourself, you're feeling good, you're making progress. But there's this thing called Postman, or another tool called Insomnia, or raw curl request, whatever you want to call it. you have the ability, or users or developers or just people have the ability to send requests to your server outside of the application. So no matter what sort of prompts and disabled buttons you do inside of your front-end application, that doesn't stop a user or a person from going to something like Postman and sending a request directly to your server, in this case with a uses link that obviously blah, blah, blah is not a valid URL. So you started to feel kind of good about this. You thought you were making progress, and you did those validation messages, and now you realize, hey, that didn't actually prevent anything, and you start to get a little bit sad because you thought you were making lots of good progress. Well, this leads us into lesson number 2. Front-end validation is not security. It's just user experience. Being able to show users a message of what is wrong with the data they're entering, or highlighting an input box red to signify that there is something wrong, or disabling a button, all of that is just user experience. It doesn't actually do anything for the security of your application. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And a little, if people will contribute to this in the chat in YouTube, I'm kind of curious. If you see this validation message, thinking about validation messages again, what does this tell you? Let's say you're trying to log in, and it comes back and it says the email and password combination you use doesn't match our records. Let me know in the chat. I don't know how big the delay is, so I might have to keep going. But what does that imply to you, if anything? And compare this with, what about this? What if it said that email does not exist? What are the different implications? What are the different differences between these two messages? Well, the first one is more vague. So the email and password combination doesn't match our records. It doesn't tell you the email is wrong or the email doesn't exist. It doesn't tell you the password is wrong or doesn't exist. It says the combination of those two very generally does not work. The second one says very specifically that email does not exist. And I wonder if you've thought about this from this perspective before. When you do these sort of validation messages, the bottom one tells me that, hey, I could try a bunch of emails, and I know if I don't get this error message, I know that that email does exist in that database. Now, whether or not that actually gives the user or the hacker the ability to go and do other things, that's kind of a different story of how you've got your application architected and the security stuff that you write. But the lesson here is that you should be very intentional with the feedback messages and alert messages that you give back to users. So again, we talked about the idea of adding front-end validation or kind of a user experience thing, but you want to be very careful about what those messages actually imply, and you need to spend some time thinking about what those messages imply, especially to someone who is trying to get into your application in some capacity by hacking it or throwing in a bunch of emails, throwing in a bunch of usernames, throwing in a bunch of passwords. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're thinking about what someone might be able to learn from that error message or validation message. All right, so we're at a React conference, but we're building a full stack application. So what about the backend for this app, just to kind of see how these things piece together? Well, in this example, again, this dev desk idea, we're using Airtable as our database. And this is kind of like a Google Sheets database. It's got a really nice GUI. It's got a really nice library. It's really cool and easy to use. I highly recommend checking it out. So that's our database. We're using Auth0 in this case for authentication, and specifically allowing users to log in with their Twitter account. That's kind of cool. And then we're associating the user's image and some of the information about them inside of that record inside of Airtable. And then we're storing the images that people upload. We're storing those inside of Cloudinary. Cloudinary is super, super cool because they can do your media management. So I can just store my images there, but they can also do transformations and optimizations. They can do all this cool media management stuff that helps, in this case, make this application a little bit more performant. And lastly, all of this application is hosted inside of Netlify using serverless functions. Again, if you followed any of the content that I do, you probably know I'm a big fan of the Jamstack. You probably have heard me talk about serverless functions before. But just think, this is basically our backend. We're using Airtable, we're using Auth0, and we're using Cloudinary to do all the things in the backend that we need, and it's all hosted inside of Netlify. So that's cool and all, but remember, if we go back a couple of slides, remember that people have the ability to send requests directly to your server. And remember, we talked about lesson number 2 is that front-end validation is not security, it's user experience. And even though we're here talking about React, mainly focused on the front end, it's important for you to then realize and take and internalize the fact that true validation and security does take place on the back end. Now, I mentioned I started this with, or this talk is about React security implications. And you might be wondering, like, why are you talking about the back end? Well, I think it's important as a front end developer to be aware of what goes on the front end and back end. At least that way, if you build something, you can ask the person who's doing the back end, say, hey, person doing the back end, are you making sure that this input is also being validated on the server? Now, this also has one other implication that maybe is more relevant. React these days doesn't necessarily just mean front end. I've been spending a lot of time recently with a framework called Next.js, and it's kind of got back-end API serverless functions baked into it. So as a React developer, as a JavaScript developer, I'm now building full stack applications, even if I hadn't been traditionally doing back-end work before. So regardless of which side you're on, it's important for you to know and internalize that the front-end stuff is just user experience. The back-end stuff is where the actual security and true validation takes place. So one additional comment on if you're accepting input and needing to do validation, if you're accepting any raw HTML content. And an example of this is maybe you have a dashboard for people to upload posts of some sort, and you want to let them upload either Markdown or like raw HTML or whatever it is. You want to make sure that that HTML doesn't have anything bad in it, nefarious in it. And this gets into a deeper conversation about cross-site scripting and how people can hack your sites. But the main point is, anytime you accept user-generated HTML content, you need to do some sort of validation around that content. And the reason is, inside of React, you have the ability to set the inner HTML of an element to raw HTML. And notice this is aptly named, this function here in React is named dangerously set inner HTML because this is actually a very dangerous thing to do. If you don't know where that HTML came from and you don't know that it's been sanitized to a certain extent. So anytime you're setting the inner HTML of something, if you didn't explicitly create it, and even if you did, just to be sure, you probably want to sanitize that input to make sure there's no scripts, to make sure there's no nefarious things that can do cross-site scripting on your site. So one example of something you can use on the front end is use the DOM Purify package. And this package is really meant to take that raw HTML and strip out anything that would be bad. And then the output of that you can use inside of your dangerously set inner HTML inside of React. So lesson number 5 here, just to kind of reiterate this, is sanitize your user-generated content. Any of that user-generated HTML content, make sure that you sanitize that before you just accept that people that give you content are doing the right thing, because a lot of people are not doing the right thing. So we're starting to do pretty well in our application. We have these different perspectives on validation and preventing users from doing the wrong thing. Well, let's add some authentication. And so inside of my site, I now add a login button, you can see, and a sign up button. Users can log in and sign up. And from there, if they log in, notice I swap out the links up there. Now it's a sign out button, and I've got a profile tab here that didn't exist before. So I'm making sure that I don't show the profile tab or the profile link unless the user is logged in. Again, I don't want the user who's not logged in to go to a profile page because they're not a user, they're not a logged in user. They don't have a profile to look at. So I just want to hide that button so that users can't go there. Well, hiding that button, hiding that link doesn't necessarily mean that users can't go there, because they can type the address of that route inside of their browser directly. So they can go to mycoolapp or yourcoolapp.com and just type in /profile. So lesson number 6 here is hiding content, hiding those links, hiding content in general doesn't necessarily stop a user. And if you think about presenting a user with a form, if they're logged in, they can submit an item with a form. If they're not logged in, they would not see the form. Well, remember, there's still the ability for them to go to Postman and send it directly. So there's almost always a way around whatever hidden content you take out of the flow because users are creative and a lot of them are developers and they know how to get around that stuff. So in this specific example of hiding routes, hiding pages, what do? Well, you end up creating something like a private route component. And I'm not going through and breaking down exactly what this thing does line by line, but what a private route component will do is when you try to navigate to that page, that component will check to make sure the user is logged in. And if not, it will redirect the user back to the home page or to a login page or wherever you want to send the user. You're making sure if this route is marked as private, that the user has to be logged in before they actually get to that route. So a link down here, this is a long one to type in and probably be easier to either wait for the slides later on or just search a complete guide to React with Auth0. And this snippet here that you see, this is an example that comes from that blog post. So if you wanted to read all the details about how that works with doing Auth0 in authentication inside of React, you can go and read that post. And that does basically exactly what's embedded in the application that I'm talking about now. So once you have that private route, now you just use that thing with your individual routes that need to be private. So in this case, we're saying the profile route needs to be private, as well as we're not using this external API route, but as an example, that's another route that would be private. And we will now prevent users from actually getting there just by using this. So lesson number 7 here is make sure to add protection to your authenticated routes. You're not just hiding the routes, you're making sure that you're actually protecting them by preventing users from getting there if they are not logged in. All right, so let's think about another example here. And this one is not quite as relevant to this application, but is something that I think a lot of people overlook. And it's the idea that you don't want to let users update content that they don't own. So what I mean is if I'm on this homepage and I click on one of these images and I go to their profile page, I shouldn't be presented with edit buttons or edit text or the ability to swap out this image if that's not my own profile. If I am logged in to my own profile, this is what I would expect to see, where I can update the image and I can update the URL. So an example of this is from a different course, and you don't have to pay attention to all of this logic here, but on the back end, you need to make sure that if a user goes to update a specific record, and this is user-generated content, records that are associated with a user, in this case, my profile, for example, you want to make sure that not only is the user logged in when they try to hit this API route or this backend route, you want to make sure that they're also the owner of that individual object. So this is an example. This is from a mini course that I have on the Auth0 channel of building an authenticated to-do app with Next.js, Airtable, and Auth0. So it actually is out on YouTube if you wanted to go watch the entire thing. But the general message is only allow users to update records they own. And again, this is often overlooked by people, and they forget to make sure of this as they design their API routes. And then on the front end in React, you have the ability to, again, show and hide content that you don't want people to use, still verifying that the backend is there to take care of the rest. So how do users prove who they are, especially in a React world, a single page application world? A lot of times we're using tokens. And very generically, a token is a unique identifier representing something, whatever that thing is. This is a quote from my teammate, Sam Bago. Go and follow him on Twitter. And a lot of this comes down to JSON web tokens. And you see this and you're probably like, I don't know what that is. That's just a big long string. Well, does this help a little bit? Or maybe this helps it break down a little bit to where you see there's 3 different parts to this token, to this big, long, random looking string. So these JWTs, these JSON web tokens have 3 parts. The first part is your header. You can see it highlighted in blue here. And your header is going to have a couple pieces of information, the algorithm that we use to encode the information, and then the type of this token, in this case, a JWT, again, a JSON web token. And then you have the payload or the body, and that's this middle section here. And you can more or less put in whatever you want here. So in this case, we've got a sub, which is a unique identifier for a user. We've got a name, and we've got an issued at timestamp to say when this token was generated. And more or less, you can kind of put whatever you want in there. And the last part is the verify signature, and we'll come back to this in a second. So with any of these tokens in place, if you get one of these tokens, you can take it to, I think I've got a duplicate slide in here, jwt.io, and you can paste in a token directly, and then it will decode that information in the header and the payload, and it'll show you what's in there. And this is really important, and it leads me into lesson number 9, which is don't put any sensitive information inside of your JWTs. No social security numbers, no credit card numbers, nothing sensitive should be going into the body of your JSON web tokens, because someone can, if they get access to that token, go to something like jwt.io, decode that thing, and see all the information that's in there. And this was a hard thing for me personally to understand when I first heard about JSON web tokens and heard an explanation about them, because if anyone can decode these, how is this actually useful for being able to send around and prove that a user is logged in? Well, it all comes down to the verify signature. And the idea is not that you can prevent users or prevent someone from decoding the information. It's that there is a unique signature that was signed with some sort of secret key. And when you receive a token, you have the ability to verify whether that thing was generated correctly. If someone intercepted the token and tampered with it and tried to change the information in the body, that would then change the verify signature. And that would change my ability, or it wouldn't change my ability. I would try to validate it and realize that this thing is not valid or not verifiable. So the lesson there is that these JWTs can be verified. So inside of React, let's say you have this token that you get from, it doesn't really matter where, but in this case, Auth0. I get an access token for this user. And then with every API request that I make to the backend, I send this token along. The beauty of that is that then the server is able to validate or verify that token and accept that the user is who they say they are and has the access to do whatever it is that, based on that token, it says they have the access to do. So the question comes, like, where do these magical tokens come from originally? Well, I mentioned in this case, they're coming from Auth0. So going through that login process, those tokens are coming from Auth0. But other than that, the answer is like, I don't know. And I don't care, to be honest. And this is a quote from the backend. The backend doesn't care where the JWTs came from, where the tokens came from. The backend only cares that it can verify or validate that token is in the format that it should be. And a good example of this is, let's say I go to the movies and I buy a ticket, movie theater, buy a ticket. I walk away to get ice cream. I drop the ticket. Someone picks it up and they walk in. The person tearing the tickets and telling people where to go has no idea that that person didn't purchase that ticket. All they know is that that person has a valid ticket. So this is also similar to if you've ever seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. There's a bunch of these golden tickets. And then all of a sudden you find one of these golden tickets. Doesn't matter where that thing came from originally. All that matters is that someone is able to validate that that golden ticket in this case is a legit golden ticket. And that gives access to the Chocolate Factory at Willy Wonka. So the biggest implication of this is be very careful of where and how you store those tokens, because if you let them get out, if someone were able to intercept those tokens, they could use them on behalf of the user, because again, the server doesn't care, and they could kind of do whatever they want. So a couple of best practices with these tokens, store them securely. We don't recommend storing tokens in local storage. There's lots of bigger debates about the impact of that. So you can kind of do some reading yourselves, but we don't personally do that. We store our tokens in memory. Use HTTPS, not HTTP. So you want to make sure that your connections are secure. Don't share your keys. So keys that are used to sign a token and then verify a token, you don't want to share those things, especially for people that aren't involved in that process or applications that aren't involved in that process. And lastly, use token expiration. If you think about something like a bank, you don't want people to be logged in for an extended period of time if they're not active. So they have very short tokens to make sure if you walk away from your computer, no one else is able to get into your account and access your bank information. So as we wrap up, as we get out of here, a couple of resources. There's a React security course from my friend and former Auth0 employee, Ryan Chinke, and this has a free version as well as a paid version. So if you're interested in much more detail into security for React, there's again the free course and the paid one, and they're both amazing. I've gone through both of them myself. Really enjoy them. So I highly recommend you check that out. And then lastly, if you're interested in building a full React application that uses serverless functions, talked about that a little bit, and also incorporates Auth0 and access tokens and verifying tokens and all of that stuff, I cover all that in this React and serverless course. You can find more information on my jamesqquick.com/courses page. And then lastly, I would love to hear from you. What did you think about the talk? Did this fit with what you expected? Was there other things you wanted to learn about? And if you fill out that feedback, which again, I would really, really appreciate, you can get a free t-shirt. So if you go to a0.2/feedback-jqq, fill out the information about the talk. Let me know how I did. I would love to hear it. And then you can also get a free t-shirt, which hopefully is enough incentive to go out and do that. And then lastly, if you have any need to email me at my Auth0 email, it's james.quick@auth0. I said lastly, but 2 more slides. If you want the slides, you can find them at jamesqquick.com/talks. And you can just go down right now. It's the first talk, but you might have to scroll down later on. And you can grab the slides there. And then lastly, thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here. I've had fun kind of watching the comments as I go through. I don't know if people think I was paying attention, but I was checking them out as I was talking as well. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And I don't know if I think we'll have a couple minutes for questions too, if people have some.
Yeah, we have like a little bit of time for questions. And I noticed you got one that was interesting. So you got one of the questions you got in chat. Can you list the cases where Next.js is best to use and cases where React.js is best to use? Which would work better for an e-commerce platform? Is there a significant difference between the two?
Yeah, I did a video about something similar. I think someone commented on this. I have to go back to the chat, but I don't use Create React App anymore myself. This example that I was walking through actually does use Create React App, but with Next.js, you have the ability to do 3 different things. You can have server-side generated content. So that's kind of like your traditional server front-end type thing. You can also do static content. So lots of people associate static content with Gatsby, but Next.js can do that as well. The third thing that you can do is you can do the exact same React that you could in Create React App inside of Next.js. So for me, there's literally no reason not to use Next.js because it already has some additional features like routing built in. So I don't have to go and get React Router. I don't have to do anything additional. I can just take advantage of the fact that Next.js will do that for me. So in my personal opinion, I don't lose anything by using Next.js. There's nothing that Create React App or like vanilla React would do that Next.js can't do for me. I can do all of that stuff inside of Next.js. So if you ask like which one is better in what scenario, my personal example is I would always use Next.js. And if you look on YouTube, I've got a detailed video of Next.js versus Gatsby versus Create React App.
That makes sense. Yeah, actually, you've got another question from the same person. It was like, do we need to use Create React App anymore after we have Next.js? And I think, like, interestingly enough, I think like you already answered that question at the same time. So
yeah, I'm using Next.js for all the stuff that I do going forward. So hopefully that helps.
So another question you got. This is a fun one. Any stories on the least secure practice you've seen for building React apps?
Yeah. So a couple of the things that we talked about is just one, where you store tokens. So if you have user generated content, so we talked about doing the sanitization on HTML stuff before. If you just kind of accept that stuff and people are able to inject a script into your site, they can go and read whatever is inside of your local storage and or your cookies, for example. So if you're not protecting yourself from cross-site scripting and you're then storing tokens in local storage, you are basically giving access to anyone that wants to go and get that stuff. I actually, in one of my demos about just kind of the Jamstack in general, I had a site where I wasn't verifying or I wasn't checking who could submit content. So what it was is a site where I was listing out all the talks that I've given. And I showed the live URL. I gave it out to people. They went to it and they just went to the form, to the page and submitted stuff. And it kind of like hacked my site real time. So the 2 things that I did with that was one, add like true authentication. And then on top of that, I added roles inside of my authentication. So even if someone else logged in with Google or Twitter or something, they would not have the role to be able to submit information. So again, thinking about the perspective of your front end stuff is just for kind of like validation and user experience. I added the logic in the back end that if someone tried to submit information, it would grab the details of the access token, look at the user's role, and make sure that they had the appropriate role to update information. So it's kind of a cool experience where like live during this talk, someone hacked it, and that's kind of exactly what you'd expect with developers. But after that, I made sure to make the update so it wouldn't happen again.
All right. Well, hey, you know what? Thank you for taking the time to give an amazing presentation on making apps secure. Like, I think like a lot of people are really going to benefit from seeing what you've taught to make sure that the React apps aren't going to be subjected to hackers. That appreciate that.
So, yeah.
And do you have any other things you want to wrap up or say before the end, before we go ahead and move on to the next speaker?
Yeah, just the feedback link that I gave. I'd appreciate any feedback, and you can go and grab a t-shirt. Other than that, James Q Quick on everything, and the Auth0 YouTube channel. So AUTH0 on YouTube, doing a lot of content there, doing more and more content there. So go and check that channel out as well. And that's it.
Well, James, hey, I hope you have a good rest of the day. And thank you so much for joining us.
All right. See ya.
See ya. All right. So we are almost wrapped up with this presentation. We got one more speaker. His name is Eric. He is a serial entrepreneur who has co-founded 2 successful technology companies prior to NIMBELLA. And in this presentation, he's going to be discussing the importance of stateful apps while using React as an example. All right, so Eric, how you doing?
Great. Actually, my talk goes really well after James' talk, because he talked about how to deal with session state and stuff, and I'm going to actually show some code about how we do it and how I do it actually, and how we secure it. But let me start by using the NIMBELLA platform and showing how you can create and deploy React apps with that. So before I actually show it, I'll discuss a bit. So the NIMBELLA platform allows you to deploy both the front end and back end at the same time. So you can develop the React front end and also the back end code that goes with it, and deploy both so that you're not kind of switching between one and the other. The back end is serverless. So what does that mean? That means that instead of writing your code as a monolithic server, you write it as functions, which are kind of independent functions. And what's a function is, you can think of it as equivalent in a way to an API endpoint, where each API endpoint is going to be a function in some code. And one popular language for writing this is JavaScript, and React, of course, can be JavaScript on the front end. So if you're a JavaScript developer, it's easy to develop both the front and the back end because it's in the same language. So let's actually take a look. I'll share my screen here. Let me actually share this. And I'll talk through this too in case somebody's just listening and not watching. Let me make sure I get the right window here. Allow. All right. Tell me if that works. Is that
no, that's not it.
That's not working. Okay, hold on. Share screen, Firefox. Just share the. Oh, it's probably this one. Okay, there we go. Okay. That one?
That looks good.
Okay, so this is the NIMBELLA website. We'll actually sign up for a new account here. We'll sign up for, I think I have just like thing here, and okay. And the next thing we want to do is download the CLI. So I'm going to download that I would download that for Linux, and you can actually just copy the link location and do a wget there, or if you're on Mac or Windows, you can install it from there. And after installing the CLI, we can go back to here and we can just wait. This thing is going to give us an authorization key, which we're going to use on the machine, and then we'll be ready to get going. So we'll kind of wait for that until that gives us a key. And I'll talk about this a little bit more while this is going on. So the when you develop a React app using the NIMBELLA platform, we handle the SSL certificates and the host names and stuff like that. So I'll show that when I deploy, that you can actually just clone something from GitHub and then deploy immediately, which is what we'll do here. And I'll assume that this will complete over here, and I'll actually keep going on the demo, and then I'll switch back to here to show what this says. So let me share this other screen. Okay, that kind of, okay, hold on a second. Okay, so now I'm going to share one of my, probably this one. Okay, so can you pull that one up? Okay, so here you can, I'm working essentially on what you can consider to be my local machine, but this is actually a VM which I have in the cloud. You can develop your React app and the backend on your local machine, or you can, use another machine as a proxy for your local machine, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm using actually a VM to do it. And what I can do is I can take this. Okay, so I can do a git clone of this GitHub. Now this is actually one of Jamie's React apps, which I can take a look at here. And I'm sorry that the switching is taking a while. Share screen, and then React. Does that go there, Jamie? That one work?
Yeah, that one should work just fine.
Okay, so here we're taking a look at this project that we're cloning. Okay, and we download the CLI. And this thing should be done now. Let's take a look. Okay, so here's our auth key. So since this is done, we're going to copy this, and we're going to go back to, and hopefully I'll be able to stop doing this screen switching here pretty soon. Okay. That one says allow. How come that's giving me a gray screen? Or can you see that, Jamie? Oh, there we go. Okay, so in here, we can do the clone, and then I can do this auth. So I'm not running these because I've already run these before on this machine. But what this does is this sets up your authorization, so now you can build and push things into the NIMBELLA platform. So we signed up for free on the website, and we enter that nimauth login to authorize us as a user. And then we can do a git clone of a repo, which is Jamie's repo, which is a React app. And then we can deploy that into the NIMBELLA platform. And it deploys because it's using that auth information. So
Hey, Eric, real quick. Sorry, could you zoom in a little bit so we can see it better?
Sure, sorry. Let me scroll down so my auth key isn't as visible, but that's just a free one. So how's that? Is that a little better?
No, that's a little better.
Okay. Okay, so in this repo, we have a README, which is the GitHub README, and then we have picture, which is the actual project, and then we have two directories. We have packages and web. And packages is the backend functions, and web is the front-end React app. So if we go into web, we see the standard React stuff of node modules, public source, stuff like that. And the source contains our app.js and stuff, just like you do get from Create React App. So from here, what we can do is we can actually just deploy both the front end and the back end with, and let me copy and paste this so I get it right, with this. And this will go deploy both the front end code and the back end code into the NIMBELLA platform, into this namespace. And when this is done, we're going to get, let me make sure I'm visible here doing this. Yeah. And when this is done, we're going to get a URL which is live on the web where we can access that app. And then I'll show you what the front end and back end code looks like and stuff like that. So this takes a while because it's deploying both the front end and the back end. And so there it's done. And right here is the URL to the React app. And let me share my web browser here. Okay. And can you see that one, Jamie?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the actual React app, and we can vote for either we're a dog person or a cat person. And now I'm going to switch back to my code. Okay. And we'll take a look at what's going on in here. So what I just showed was that we authorized on the NIMBELLA platform, we cloned a GitHub repo, and then we deployed it, and we got a URL which allowed us to access the React app front end and also the code which is on the back end. The back end code actually has two functions. So this has two URL endpoints. And one is to, when we vote for either a dog or a cat, it calls add vote. And when we need to display information in the React app, we call get votes and we display it. So let's take a look at the React code for fun. Okay. And one thing we notice is that this is the URL for handling the add vote, and this is the URL for handling the get votes. And so here in the display code, use effect is called when the React app renders. What we're doing is we're getting the votes, and then we're setting them in the state, and then that will automatically cause React to update. And we're actually using this refresh counter thing because we're actually not changing the value of the dog vote thing itself, and so we're using a refresh counter to be the thing that React is checking so that when there's a state change with that, it updates. And then when we click the button for when we click this button here, it handles vote. That one's for dog and that one's for cat, and that calls this, and it posts this function on the back end. So how did we get these URLs? You'll notice that the code in GitHub actually has a different URL. It has a URL pointing into Jamie's namespace. But we can, when we deploy, we can do a nim action get votes like this. And this will give us the, get votes. Get votes. And this will give us the URL of the get votes. And so when we create a function, and I'll actually show the function, the backend functions are in packages. So this is the function get votes. It just you'll see that there's not much here, and the reason there's not much here is because we're using NIMBELLA's state information. So there's a Redis that is associated with this project, and we can just get the key out of Redis for dog and cat and return that. So the code's very small, and the set will use Redis to set the count for those two things. So this is the get votes function, and then the URL endpoint is that. So in the front end code, we can use that. So this is an example of an application that uses state and has a front end and back end. The front end is a node, and the back end is in the NIMBELLA system. And we didn't have to deploy any servers or anything like that, or access any, or do any other resources. You just deploy both of them, and then you can kind of start using that. Okay. So how do we change the code? Let's say we wanted to change the code. Well, there's a couple ways of doing it. One is that React developers, like when I'm developing React, I just change the code and it should automatically refresh, you know, the interface. But here, if we're deploying the React app to the NIMBELLA platform, you know, do I have to change the code and then deploy it and then test? And the answer is no. So what you can do for developing, well, I'll first show developing the front end code, and then I'll show developing the back end code, because they're two different processes. So if we go in the web directory, we see this is your standard React app. And what I can do is I can just do an npm start here and start it as you'd normally start a React app. The only thing is this will start, oh yeah, it's already running on port 3000. So okay. So this should start it up on localhost port 3000. Now this is a machine in the, if this was on your local machine, you could connect your local browser to it, but this is actually a VM machine which I've got running somewhere else. So I'm not going to be able, because it's connected to localhost, I'm not going to be able to connect to it from my web browser where I am. So what I did was I set up just an Nginx proxy, which is listening to port 443, the HTTPS port, and this allows me to connect into that machine. It'll proxy down to the localhost port 3000. So I'll actually, you just install Nginx, and if I go to Nginx, I can look, this is my config for it. So you can see I've got a server name just called node.nimbella.io for this node example. It listens to port 443. I have my SSL certificates for nimbella.io, so it's a valid Let's Encrypt certificate. And when it gets requests, it's going to proxy to localhost port 3000. So now what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to do this. Oops. I can start there. And as soon as this is listening, the Nginx is listening right now. So I've already started that up. And it's listening to port 3000, and now I can go to, let me go back to my StreamYard thing, and let me share that StreamYard. Okay. Can you see that, Jamie?
All right, I got it up.
Is that visible, Jamie? I actually can't.
Oh yeah, it's visible now.
It is. Okay, so you can see I'm going to node.nimbella.io, which is going to that machine. That's going to an Nginx, and that's proxying to that local node application. So now I think I'm just going to share my whole screen here. That'll make it easier, but it'll be kind of small. So let me share the whole screen. Okay, you can see that. Okay, and this might be a little bit small, but if
I would
go
recommend zooming in on the actual thing you're typing in.
I'll just, this is just kind of, it's not important to see exactly what's in here, so I'll just kind of show this in general. So I'm logged into this machine over here, and I can just change like some of the React code and save it out. And as soon as I save it out, you can see that the page is refreshed, right? So this is how you normally do React development. You just go and you change, you just go and you change code, you save it out, and then you can see see the reflected changes in the user interface. So what you can do is the way I'm kind of explaining this is you can run the node server on your development machine, develop React like you normally do. If you're local to your development machine, you can just point your web browser at that. If you're doing it on a VM somewhere like I am, you can use Nginx to proxy to that local node server. Do your development like that. And when you're done, you can just do the deploy. And so that will deploy it into the NIMBELLA system under its host name and URL. And that way, you don't have to run some server or something, or if it's running on your local machine, that's not accessible to other people, but when you deploy it to NIMBELLA, it is. So you can develop React the way you normally do, and then when done, you deploy it basically into the system. So let's make some changes to some back-end code. So that's how we do the front-end code. The back-end code, we can't just make the change locally and then run it. It has to be pushed into the NIMBELLA serverless system when we make changes. So let's go, let me share this screen out again. Okay, and stop there. I'm really switching a lot here. Okay, that's this one, right? So now a backend change, if we go into packages, let's change the get votes to say we return the dog vote times 10, okay? So we save that out, and we can do a nim. Let me just copy and paste it. It's faster than me typing it. Yeah, actually here. So we can do an incremental deploy. And what this means is that don't deploy the whole thing, just deploy the changes which I made. So it'll take the changes which I made to the back end. And then if we go, we should see, what we should see is, and this is going to be on both of these, we should see that, let's go stop there, and let me share the StreamYard, and this is going kind of slow. The next piece will go a little bit quicker. And so when this is done deploying, which it's finished, what we see is that this is 90 instead of 9, right? Every time we update, it's going to increment by 10. So for deploying the front end, we can just make changes and save it out. If we run Node on that machine, when we're done making the front end changes, we can deploy the whole thing into the system. And on the back end, we make changes and we incrementally deploy, so it only pushes the changes which we make. And then, you know, the front end's connecting to that, so it gets those changes. So that's how that's how I do development actually on it, and it goes pretty quick. And there are some different, there's some other stuff I could get into. Am I going kind of long? Probably going kind of long. Of where you can look at these activations. Activations are when your backend function is called, it generates an activation log record. So you can look and you can see different performance characteristics about it. Actually, let me actually do this for fun, just because I'll take a couple extra seconds to do it. Okay. Oh, that's the wrong command. Hold on. Just write it out. Okay. So this is the list of recent activations, and then we can, if we want to see the different commands, so here they are. I normally make this bigger. If we want to see the different activation commands that are available, I can just type nim activation. If I want to see the different commands available, I can just type nim. I can look at one specific activation. Let's just take a look at this one just to show you what you get. Oh, sorry. Spelled it wrong. So you get all this information, you get, this is what was returned in the body, you get what was sent, and all this kind of stuff, the activation ID and some of the memory and a whole bunch of information about it. So that's kind of the logging of each function. So if you have functions which failed in the past or something, you can take a look at those. So that's kind of how development goes with Node and the front end and back end. So now we're going to touch some of the questions which are interesting for React, and that kind of goes into actually the previous conversation, and that is how to handle session stuff and state and security on that. So for that, I'm going to switch to this thing. Okay. Okay, so the first thing is I use Auth0 quite a bit. And so there's a couple ways of handling login and to your application. And one is you can write your own login form, and then the user submits like their username and password, and you keep a list of usernames and hopefully encrypted passwords in a database. And so they go to your code on the back end. Your back end code checks the database, sees if there's valid, and returns some kind of login or session cookie. But Auth0 can handle that for you as well. And so this allows users to click on use an existing GitHub login or use logins from other services, Google login. And if they don't have those, they can enter a username password, and those username passwords are stored in Auth0. So you can get out of the whole managing user login kind of stuff, which is kind of nice, and also make it easier for users because they can use their existing GitHub to log in. So Auth0 has a callback. So I've got step 1 here, which is the callback step. So you put up your Auth0 stuff, and when you're done, Auth0 will call you back. And it will give you you can get it to give you a JSON web token that contains the login. So this has already been validated by Auth0, and you get this JSON web token. And you can try to have the callback go directly to React. So you can try to write a React route, which is like a /login route or something like that. And what you'll find is that's fraught with difficulty. The reason is because React likes to render all sorts of things asynchronously. And the login process is really a synchronous process where you want, Auth0, and then you want this to happen, and then you want this to happen. And React likes to just have whatever happens at once. If the data's not there, it's going to start rendering anyway, and when the data becomes available, it's going to render this. And it gets very messy. And you get into some weird corner cases where the login process might work 9 out of 10 times or 99 out of 100, but 1 out of 100 times React has some timing where it's rendering and doing this other thing at the same time, and it doesn't work. So in debugging a bunch of those, what I've found is one of the best things to do is just to move this sequential login process outside of React. So when your React program, when your React app is running, the user is already logged in. So for Auth0, you go through the Auth0 login process, and then what I usually do is you end up at a login.html, which is actually, so the callback for Auth0 is not in the React route, it's actually in some login.html code, which looks like this. So this is basically the handoff, this is the handoff code, which is the handoff between Auth0 and my React app. So all we're doing here is this thing gets called, so we put this in public login.html, so it's just a file called login.html. It gets the Auth0 token out of a parameter called token, and it calls a backend login function. So in our case, this is the serverless function like the get vote, which is going to be login, and it's actually going to be under API accounts. And it sends the Auth0 token, and it also sends this flag which says set a cookie. And then if we get a valid response, we go to /, which is actually our React app base. So the callback for Auth0 goes to login.html. The login.html goes and validates the Auth0 login and actually sets our own cookie. So we're going to switch from the Auth0 stuff to our own session cookie, and then goes to the React app. And this just saves a lot of problems and makes it easy to debug, actually. What does this login code look like on the back end? So we're getting past an Auth0 token and we're getting a cookie. And how do we store, and one of the questions before was, where do we store the session state? And how do we prevent cross-site scripting problems and all this stuff? So there's actually a neat way to do it with HTTP. And it's how you set the cookie. So I'm actually going to go down to where the session cookie is to start out with this discussion a bit. And you'll see there's two flags on this cookie which I'm using. So this is my session cookie, and I'm setting HTTP only to true and secure to true. Secure is a very simple thing on a cookie, which just says only send this when the connection is HTTPS. So if there's a clear text connection, we're not going to send it. The HTTP only token is a flag is a really interesting one, and that says that this cookie can't be read by the front-end JavaScript code. So it's only sent when requests are made. So what does that mean? So that means that the front-end React code doesn't know about this cookie. And if you have some kind of cross-site scripting, it can't get access to it actually, because JavaScript can't access it. This cookie is only sent when requests are coming back to this back end. So what the back end can do is it can say, hey, set this cookie, but when you make requests to me for different API calls, you're going to send me that cookie. But you, the React code on the front end, can't see it. So this is pretty nice because if you have developers who want to try to store information about a user on the front end in the front end React code, they really can't because they don't have access to the user's login at all. The login is sent only to the login information is only sent to the back end as part of the API call. So what the front end becomes is it's simply a presentation layer. And so the front end does a call like, if it's a stock application, give me the stock positions that this person owns. And the front end doesn't know what user is logged in actually. It does a call to the back end saying, give me the stock positions. In that call to the back end is included this cookie, which is the session cookie, and then the back end knows what user it is and knows what stock information they have, returns it to the front end, and the front end can display that information. But the front end doesn't even know the user who's logged in. Let's say the front end needs to know the usernames to present it in a button or something. Well, it'll call the back end and it'll say, give me the name of the user, or give me profile information of the user, and the back end can return it. But that's just for display for the front end. The front end actually doesn't even know anything which is going on. It doesn't even know if the user's logged in. It has to call the back end to say, is the user actually logged in at this point? So the front end, it's pretty nice for the front end because you can't screw it up very easily. So let's talk about this some more. So let's go through this. This is our, and if you go online to look at best practices for where to maintain session stuff, there's a lot of different things. So this is my view of one way of doing it. It's the way that I do it because it seems to avoid mess ups where, you know, it's easy to get lazy and start keeping something on the front end associated with the user. And here you just get rid of all that and you say, look, only the back end knows about this. This makes things a little more interesting in React because when you initially render a page, you have no data to render. You always have to call a back-end API call to render, to get information to render. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Well, first we'll go through the login thing. So this is this login switch where we're switching from auth0 over to ours. So this is just getting some information about auth0 so we can validate the auth0 jaw token. This is some stuff about cores. If you're using a front end which is on a different host name than a back end, you're going to run up against cores where browsers will block you from making a back-end request to some other location, to some other host name, and so you need to do this core stuff to do it. I could spend more time going into that, but I'm running low on time, so I'll switch to talking about the login process here. So this is the login on the back end. We get the auth0 token, which has been passed to us. We decode it here. Now, we're decoding it only to get the header kid thing. And so what this is going to do is we need this because we need to actually go to auth0 and verify that this jaw token is from auth0. From the previous presentation, you know that these, you can kind of create your own and send it over there. We need to make sure that this token that we got is really from auth0. So we go and we get their signing key and stuff, and we verify that it came from them. Okay, and this is what happens if somebody tries to forge an auth01. So now we've verified it's come from them, and we've decoded it. The information in the auth0 token contains the login, the unique login ID of the user. Now this may be a login ID from GitHub or from some other location, but this thing, decoded.sub, is where they keep the unique user ID for, which is going to be service specific. So it's going to say GitHub Eric, 5193 or whatever. And since auth0 has validated that, and we know that it's from auth0, we can use that and say that will uniquely identify the user. And if somebody tries to forge this, they're going to fail the signing thing where we check that it's from auth0. And it's auth0's job to verify that that somebody hasn't forged it on the way in from GitHub. So from here we have the user's ID, and what we're going to do is we're going to go into our own database, and we're going to say, give me the database ID where the key name is this auth0 user. So we have a database table of logins. These logins have an uniquely generated ID, and the ID is associated with their auth0 ID. And now we have our database ID, and we're going to say, get it out of the results. If there isn't one, it's the first time they've logged in, so we need to create a new login record for them. And then what we do is we're going to create our own token. So we're going to assign one for us, which expires in a day. We're going to set it as Portal API token, and this is where we set it as HTTP only. This max age is kind of funny because for some reason it's in milliseconds. And we're setting this on NIMBELLA.io with a path of /, so anybody in NIMBELLA.io is going to see this in this case. And then we return that, and since this is in the result, the browser made this call, it's going to set a cookie, and each subsequent request is going to include that cookie, but the front end isn't going to be able to see the cookie. So now let's say we have a code which is like get positions. This would be like get stock positions, and we're writing this as a backend function. We can do that. In Node. We can have a chain basically of things that get called before this code executes, and we can just put a require auth in there. And so this is going to be so that handled the login. Now we're writing the code to say get positions and return them, so that, because the front end is going to say give me the positions, and then it's going to display it in some table or something like that. The front end doesn't need to send any user information. It simply calls get positions. The cookie is sent as part of that, and then the back end can get that login ID. Actually, I can show it to you here. So the back end code can look like this: app get, and then this is the back end API endpoint. It's got a require auth, which is going to get executed before this function is executed, and then in the function we can just get the login ID. So this is a key. This is a key thing. Now this is going to look at that Portal API token. You can see. And it's going to pull the login ID out of it. So that's what it's going to do. So this function gets called for each backend function which has require auth on it. It's going to go through the cookies, and this bearer token thing you have, this is if you want to allow people to call the API directly with a bearer token instead of the cookies, so we can ignore that for right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to verify the token given our key, which is what we encrypted it with up here. And that decodes it, and then we can pull this out. So we've verified that we're using a secret key of our own, which is this. And so when we create the JAW token, we're creating it with that secret key. When we verify the JAW token, we're verifying it with that secret key. So somebody's not going to be able to forge it unless they know that secret key. And then we decode it and we pull the login ID out of it. And if it doesn't work, we can throw a 401. So if somebody tries to forge their way into this positions function and forge a login ID in there, they're gonna the JAW token isn't going to validate because it's not going to match the secret key, and it's going to throw a 401 before we get to this. And so this code can be written very cleanly, where we just say this is the code, require auth, I've got the login ID. Now I can just use that in the database to go get that information. So let's take a look at this kind of diagram. So this is when a page renders which wants to display a set of stock transactions. So the node page renders. useEffect is going to call get transactions. Okay. Now useEffect is node renders things asynchronously. So the application is going to render at first blank, and you can put little things in there so you don't start showing empty tables and stuff. But it's going to render immediately, and then useEffect's going to get called. And then you do your backend API call in useEffect to do get transactions. This is going to call the require auth to get the login ID out of the JWT and validate. If it's validated, you use that to find the transactions in the database. You go back and you return them to transactions, sets the resultant state, and that causes the front end to re-render with the list of user transactions. So the front end code becomes very simple. What you see is to display information in useEffect, you're just making a backend API call. You're not passing any user credentials at all. You're just saying, give me the positions. The backend call is guarded by that require auth where it's pulling the login ID out. Instead of a login ID, you can also use a session ID or something. And then it's going to look in the database for that. It returns it to the front end, and then the front end renders it. So there's not any kind of user management stuff in the front end. It's just doing API calls to the back end, and the back end is handling all the validation, and the front end doesn't even know what user is logged in. So this is just programmers adding code have no other way to get the login ID. The front end code has no access to that itself. So that's one way of handling that. And this is with a pass off from auth 0 to your own cookie. So you could just manage it from there, where auth 0 is the process to get into your React app, but from there on out you can manage your own cookies. So that kind of shows how you can build and deploy a React app on NIMBELLA, and then also how you can deal with some of the issues that deal with login and state and security around that, and guarding your back-end code, and putting all the stuff in the back end for security, and making sure that if somebody else starts messing with the code, if they're messing with the front-end code, they can't. It's really hard to mess it up and open up lots of security holes. So how am I doing on time, Jamie?
I think at this point it'd be a good time to like wrap up.
Okay.
I think it's like you're like about like 1 or 2 minutes away from your time.
Oh, that's pretty good. I thought I went like 20 minutes over.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, so we got a little bit time like for some questions. Let me pull them up real quick. Okay. What are good? Do me a favor. Can you mute your mic real quick?
Absolutely. Hold on a second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what are some good beginner apps I could build if I want to start building apps that are stateful?
I think your dog and cat app is a pretty good one, because it's nice and simple, and you can just grow it out from there from whatever state you want. Now that one doesn't handle login, so I think login is where it gets more interesting. And I think to do login, the first thing you should do is just use auth 0. They have a free tier, and then you should kind of go through kind of what I said and switch in and get the token that they send you as a callback, decode it, verify it's from them, kind of switch to your own, and then you can do whatever you want from there. You're going to need some kind of state on the back end, which you're going to store, which is specific to your application and specific to that user.
Okay.
But yeah, I would start with your dog cat app.
I agree. All right, so the next question, what kind of money do I have to spend to build stateful apps on your platform? Does handling the state cost extra money?
No, you saw that we just signed up for the free tier and we used it.
Okay.
The pricing information's on the website, but to get going, you can just use the free tier.
All right. What are the limitations of only building stateful apps?
What are the limitations of only building stateful apps? I don't understand that question.
I guess, yeah. I think it just means, like, what you can and cannot do. I imagine whoever asked that question wasn't really familiar with what a stateful app is. It just basically means, like, keeping track of the app state.
Yeah, there's a couple different types of state. Like in the dog and cat app, you just have a global set of votes so that anybody who runs that app and clicks add a vote for cat, it's going to add it for everybody else as well, right? Then there's another type of state, which is user-specific state. So, I have a different set of widgets that I own than somebody else. And so when I'm checking my inventory, I want that. So there you need to maintain some state in some type of database, whether it's a key value database or a SQL database or whatever. And so we have a key value database which automatically comes with the platform. If you want a SQL database, you want to use that somewhere else and be querying into that.
Okay. So I got 2 more questions. Can you explain the point once more where you say the front end only requests for the API endpoint call, but doesn't know about the login? How does it send the login information to the backend?
Okay, so this I've got to get across. I hope I hope I wasn't confusing. So there's a special type of flag on HTTP cookies called HTTP only. And what this means is that the cookie is not visible to the front end. So the front end doesn't have to do anything to send the cookie in a request. The front end can't look at the cookie. So if your JavaScript code says, give me information about the cookie, it's not going to get it. Okay. So what this means is the back-end code can return a response to the front end that says for subsequent requests to the same hostname endpoint, then add this cookie along with. And so what happens is the front end will say to the back end, it starts out, let's say, with auth 0. The front end says to the back end, hey back end, here's the jaw token from auth 0, and it's calling a backend function. The backend function goes, oh, okay, well, you know what? That's a valid login. So here's a session cookie, and whenever you make calls to the backend from now on, send this session cookie. But I'm sending it to you in a way such that you, the front end, can't see it. So the front end gets a response, okay, and the front end can look at the HTTP response and see that it's a 200 OK, which then it's like, okay, it's a 200 OK, I'm guessing the guy's logged in. If the front end wants to see if the guy's logged in at that point, he can't check a cookie or anything like that. He has to call the back end and say, hey, is the guy really logged in? And the back end will get this cookie, which is a session cookie, look at it and say, yeah, that looks good to me. Hey, front end, the guy's logged in. The front end's like, okay. And the front end's like, hey, can you show me, the full name of this guy? And the back end is going to get this cookie along with it, and it's going to say, okay, this is the guy. Let me go find out his full name. I find out the full name. I return it to the front end. So the front end has to call the back end for everything, right? And it doesn't have access. It doesn't even know if the user is logged in. It can't check the cookie to see its state. It also can't associate information with that. And if you have other funny JavaScript which gets in there, that can't go get that information. This is something which they added to the to HTTP cookies, and it's the HTTP only flag. And there are some other flags in HTTP, but that's the one that I really liked using for login stuff. And it was pretty much designed for this reason. It was designed so that you could have cookies which the front end didn't have access to. And this keeps it so that you don't have to, if your code on the front end gets all screwed up, it doesn't have access to the user anyway. This doesn't mean that the front end code can't mess up, because if somebody can inject code in the front end, they can force a call to your back end, which is going to pass that cookie, right? But at least it prevents a bunch of problems.
All right.
But they have to do it through your app, where they force the call into your thing.
All right, cool. So Eric, go ahead. Thank you so much for giving this detailed presentation, going over all this. Other than that, do you have any other last things you want to say before we go ahead and wrap up this 3 hours of React?
No, I'm good.
All right, cool. Well, Eric, hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that was 3 hours of React. So I want to take the time to thank all the speakers who came in and presented. All of you did fantastic, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I also want to thank all of our community speakers, all of you. Without your help, like, we wouldn't have gotten all the signups to be able to participate in this event. So thank you so much for sharing the event and helping out. Also, I want to thank every single person who has joined in, asked questions, and participated in the event itself. So 3 simple things I want to go ahead and talk about before we go ahead and wrap up. Let me go ahead and just share my whole screen here. Okay, so 3 things. One, we are on Twitter, and if you are interested in joining us on Twitter and like keeping up to date with not only this event, but other upcoming events for learning about serverless technology and just programming in general, definitely follow us there, where we'll be posting regularly. Secondly, somewhere at the beginning, I had mentioned that you can get a certificate for participating in this event. If you're interested in getting your hands on a certificate, or you just kind of want to hang out and ask questions about building stateful serverless apps or getting introduced to serverless technology, then you can go to our official Slack channel. From there, what you would do is that you would go into the e-certificate channel on our official Slack channel, and you would post that you're interested in getting your certificate. And I'll be sure to post this link in the chat as well. All right. Okay. And lastly, so as a thank you for everyone who has participated in this event. So as I stated before, as Eric was going through, we have a serverless cloud platform that allows you to focus on your code logic and nothing else, to be able to take apps and deploy them to the cloud. We do have a free tier, but we also do have a pro version. And what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be giving the pro version out 3 months for free. So if you want to be able to, utilize that and kind of see what it's like to code with that, all you have to do is fill out a simple form with your email, submit your name, and we will go ahead and get your account set up. So I would recommend, if you do that, definitely, make an account on NIMBELLA.com first, then fill out the form. And from there, you can go ahead and use our Slack channel to ask questions, like with what you can do with your platform. And also definitely feel free to message me. I personally work with developers one-on-one through either Slack messages or video chats to be able to help them kind of figure out what they can and cannot do with the platform, and see how I can help them get their application from beginning to end. So if that's something that you would like, definitely fill out this form and do all of that. I will fill out this. So I will post a link in the chat. So that is the end of 3 hours of React. Thank you so much for every single person who joined us, and I hope everyone has a good rest of the day.